Good morning, y'all. Welcome to the stream. Today we're going for the legendaries. We got Mamlambo, Lamantra, Speilfinne, Big Larry, and amemasu. So they're all active. Okay, so let's see. I need to go. Let's go troll sport. Morning. And let's see. Let's get my gear set up here. Okay, so let's see, hold on. I gotta see what wrong thing. I gotta see what I caught. What I caught, amemasu. I caught him on the orange crankbait with the red line in it. Okay. There got it. So I caught him when the orange crankbait. Okay, caught him on that crankbait. So the 2-aught crankbait. So first things first. So we'll catch Speilfinne on this, and we'll catch Lamantra on that. Okay, and then Big Larry is going to be this with cheese, and we'll go to this rod. Change the hook size to which one? Daggone it. Okay, which rig do I got that's got the 2-aught hook on it? It's not that one. Okay, it's this one. Alright, so we're going to change this hook size to a 7. Put a red worm on that. And this one we're going to go change the hook size to 2-aught with cheese. Okay, so let's see. Speilfinne is jerkbait. Lamantra is the jerkbait. Amemasu's crankbait. Larry is cheese. And then we'll swap out this. I wanted to make sure I got that. What is this? I got the 2-aught frog, and I have the 2-aught spinner, and where's the other one? And the other 2-aught spinner. Okay, so we're good there. So we got everything we need. All right, let's go to challenges. Now we're gonna do 57 pounds. Okay, and yeah, we'll do any 2 bronze just for grins. And then we'll go here. Yeah, we'll do the 110 pounder. Okay. Now, this week he is, I believe, over here. I believe he's over here. Let me double check. Double check. Oh, what the heck? They caught him way over there. No, they caught him right there. Yeah, so he is literally going to be right in here. So we're gonna go. Which trailhead? I'll go to this trailhead because there's the boat dock. Come on. Fast travel. Okay. So we are set up now. And since we are set up, we're going to go here. And let's see. Need to pick a book. Something to break through my silence. Let's see. Let's see. All right. We will go with this one.
Episode 1, Rescuing a Stranger.
Alright. So.
It was mid-afternoon, and Jacob was busy reading under his favorite cherry tree in the orchard. He lived with his grandmother in a town in Wisconsin, and reading was his favorite pastime in between classes. The weather was sunny all morning, but it kept growing darker and cloudier by afternoon. Soon enough, dark clouds covered the entire sky and pressed down towards the ground. The noise of thunder and lightning startled Jacob.
I'm gonna sneeze.
Now have to go back
Gotta
inside.
sneeze. Oh, excuse me.
However, Jacob didn't focus on that as he felt the weight of the girl on his body and felt that his hands were getting numb. He looked down at the girl in his arms. Long black lashes, short ponytail, snow white hair, youthful figure, and the blue school uniform with the Cherry Girls High School badge. She seemed like a senior in high school, and
I believe I got that.
Jacob couldn't seem to take his eyes off her. Ah! The girl woke up in pain. It took her a few seconds to finally realize.
There he is, right there in front of us.
She screamed as she opened her blue eyes. She looked at Jacob and suddenly tried to stand back up on her feet.
Did we get him?
Not weigh as much. The impact of the fall made Jacob's legs
Maybe.
numb, and now that she was finally awake, he couldn't help but wonder about her fall. There weren't any buildings around, and she certainly fell from a height way above the trees. Where did she come from, after all?
We're getting stopped.
Touched her body and then rubbed her lips that felt a little swollen. After she saw the red mark on Jacob's lips, she blushed and hit Jacob's neck. Hey, I saved you. Before Jacob could finish his sentence, the girl already ran off.
Come on.
Girls nowadays are really tough. She seems fine after falling from such a height. Jacob rubbed his neck and watched the girl running away.
That was quick. I think he shot into that lure.
Thankfully, she didn't hit my face or break my neck. He then rubbed his lips.
Oh, come on.
Lips coming down on his, he somehow didn't feel like he kissed her. It wasn't the kind of warmth you would feel when you kissed a girl. Not that Jacob or his friends had any luck with girls so far in their 20 years of existence. He was already a second-year university student, but he still didn't have a girlfriend. I'm such a loser, Jacob thought as he patted his thighs and stood up. He looked up at the
Can't tell if that's him or not. It might be.
all gone, and even the sun had come out. Damn this weather. I thought there was going to be a huge storm, Jacob murmured to himself. He didn't want to get too hung up on what just happened. He quickly got to the corner store and bought 2 decks of cards. After that, he promptly returned to his dorm that was located at the south end of the campus. A As soon as he entered, his roommate Sam spoke up. "What took you so long? Quick, we were all waiting." Jacob's 3 roommates were waiting for him. Jacob threw the 2 decks of cards onto the table and said, "You guys can play. I'm not in the mood." "What's up? You look grim." Sam.
That's him, I think.
Asked, "Didn't we agree to this?"
That was him. Wow, he came in like a greased lightning.
"I'm just a little dizzy," Jacob said as he crawled up to the top of the bunk bed that belonged to him.
One down.
"Hey, we agreed on playing cards today." Sam wasn't too happy. "Are you okay?" asked another roommate.
One down.
He was worried
4 to
about
go.
"Not sure. I'm just not feeling too well." Jacob rubbed his chest as he responded. "Did my organs get injured from the impact when I caught that girl?"
Let's see. Okay. Remove
"Should we
waypoint.
take you to the infirmary?" Sam also got serious as he saw Jacob's face. "It's fine. I fell by accident on my way to the corner store." Jacob pointed at his chin that swelled a little. It was hit by that girl's head, but he didn't bother telling his friends about the strange encounter. "Then get some rest. Since it's not raining, we're going to the cafe," said the third
Okay, so
roommate.
got that one.
"Yeah, you guys go ahead." Jacob waved at them. He wasn't feeling up for anything but some sleep. Sam was still a little worried.
Thought he
"Just
weighed
call me
more
if
than
you
that.
need anything," he said. "Okay." Jacob took off his slippers and got in his comfortable
Oh, okay.
Before
Let's
a
go
few
down to the
hours
dock
later,
here and we'll catch another one
except
real
for
quick.
gaming and playing cards, they didn't have any other passion. Jacob sighed as he fell asleep. He was exhausted for some reason. When he woke up, it was already 6 in the evening. There was a box of takeout food on the table. It was the dinner that 3 of his roommates got for him. Through the doors, Jacob heard the noise of his roommates playing cards in the dorm room next to his. They were afraid of being loud and waking up Jacob, so they were playing next
Okay
door.
then.
"Real brothers," smiled Jacob. He scratched his head as he climbed down from his bed to get the food. When he stretched out his hand to open the parcel, he was shocked. His body froze in place. In the dark room, he saw a circle of green skin on his right wrist. Jacob felt like his heart had stopped beating for 5 seconds. He drew the curtain so that he could see his arm better. A green fish scale-like tattoo covered his right arm from wrist to shoulder. Jacob felt like he was hallucinating. He rubbed his eyes and the green skin was still there. He then tried to smear this green matter off of his
Ow.
body, but it didn't work. Jacob felt a chill down his spine. He quickly undressed and stood up to the mirror. He wanted to see if there was anything like this on other parts of his body, but there was nothing. He got dressed again and began to eat his food. After about half an hour, his roommates came back and asked Jacob if he was feeling better. Jacob said that he wasn't sure. His roommates offered to take him to the infirmary, but he refused. The truth was that Jacob was himself puzzled with the day. A girl that fell from the sky and into his lap out of nowhere. The foreboding of a storm. The green, scaly skin on his arm. He touched his wrist once again and made sure it was hidden from his roommates. He didn't want to freak them out until he found out the truth about the strange events of the day. But how will he find out? Will these scaly marks disappear, or would he have to live with them forever? Who was that mysterious girl? Episode 2. We meet again. Just as Sam and the others in the dorm were discussing Jacob's strange behavior and his stab on his chin, Jacob left the dorm frantically. He waved down
That
a
finish
taxi
it
and on
off.
his way to the hospital he found in the best department of dermatology,
I think so.
Bowen Memorial Hospital.
Yep, it did.
Once there,
Okay,
Jacob was
we're
made to
done.
go through a number of cumbersome administrative procedures and tire some checkups. After going through a pile of reports, the dermatologist finally told Jacob that the streaks on his arm were caused by a type of dye. It was probably a discoloration from some bad quality bed sheets. According to the reports, there was no mutation of cells in his body. All the results from the various tests
All right.
had indicated no
Now we will
abnormalities.
go
Moreover,
to
the green
Spain.
color was not a result of pigmentation. As for the scaly patterns, it was only accidental. The color happened to spread out in a relatively regular pattern. Most importantly, it was definitely not contagious. Although unconvincing, this explanation was enough to assure Jacob and calm him down for the time being.
There goes.
Clutching his reports, Jacob left the hospital and returned to his dorm room. He began scrubbing his arm with soap. He noticed that the color did seem to lighten a bit. He heaved a sigh of relief. After an afternoon of such terrifying events, he could finally get some rest. Now he was finding his panic a bit silly and chuckled. He changed his bedsheet into a clean one and quietly climbed into his bed. He tiptoed so that his roommates wouldn't wake up and slept as
Turn the
soon as his head
spatula
hit
off.
the pillow. The Saturday afternoon sun shone brightly through the curtains, and the sunlight was directly falling on Jacob's face. But he was sleeping like a log. Jacob! Jacob! Someone banged the dorm room with loud thuds, calling out Jacob's name frantically. Heck, who is it? Sam, who was sleeping on the bed below Jacob's, threw a pillow at the door in anger. Jacob, there's a cute girl waiting for you. It was one of their classmates at the door.
Let's see.
Cute girl? Cute girl?
I think she's right
As
here.
confused and dazed as he was, Sam abruptly woke up from his dream and rose to an upright position. Ever since Sam was rejected by the most popular girl at the university, he had lost the courage to pursue a relationship. However, he secretly wished that he had a girlfriend. Jacob, get up! I've got to come and get you and take you to the cute girl waiting for you outside. There are so many people already gathered around the entrance of our cafeteria because they can't believe that a girl is looking for you. You have quite an audience. The classmate kept banging at the door. What the hell are you talking about? Jacob shouted. He was finally up, and gently rubbing his slightly aching stomach, Jacob remembered something. As he raised his arm, a trace of the winding green marks came into sight. It did not fade away, but it did not expand either. He felt a little relieved. I'm coming! I'm coming! Jacob jumped off the bed and went to the door. By this time, Sam, who was sitting on his bed listening to the commotion, knew that he could not sleep anymore and rose from his bed grudgingly. On the other hand, upon hearing the words "cute girl," Sam began to dress excitedly. So many people have surrounded the entrance of our cafeteria. My roommate and I were on our way to get food and thought there was a fight or something. We went over to take a look and found that it was a pretty girl waiting for someone. The classmate started talking without a pause as soon as Jacob opened the door to his room. That doesn't necessarily mean she's waiting for me, does it? Particularly if a good-looking girl's in question. Why don't you ask Sam to talk to her? I'm not interested.
Oh, wait a
Jacob
minute,
glared at
guys.
his
I think I
classmate
did
in
this
annoyance.
wrong.
He had a sound sleep, but upon waking,
I think
his
I'm on the
entire
wrong
body
lure.
felt uneasy and his muscles ached.
Oh, yeah.
Being woken up by this meaningless commotion had only irked him more.
Okay.
Let me finish.
That's why I hear the
The
bubbles.
classmate grabbed Jacob's shoulders excitedly.
This is the one with
That
bottom
pretty
right.
girl had a poster in her hands, and it is totally you. She said that whoever brings you to her would get awarded $500. Me? Jacob looked lost. He looked at his classmate sternly. You are here for the $500, aren't you? His classmate's smile was a little too bright. I'm here for the drama, too. Jacob heard a growing commotion, and it felt like a crowd was approaching the outside of his dorm building. Jacob walked over to the balcony and saw a big group of students, mostly boys he was acquainted with, running wildly towards his dorm room. He could tell they were all coming after him because of the reward. He rushed inside his room and quickly threw on some clothes and shoes and followed his classmates down the stairs. As the dorm captain, Sam worried about any unexpected mishaps. Plus, he also wanted to see the girl. He rushed outside too, closing the dorm room shut. Sam was Jacob's closest friend. Even though he was usually foul-mouthed and liked to bug Jacob a lot, he was also the one who cared about Jacob the most. The dorm building was situated outside the campus, and as the trio walked along the entrance and entered the campus, they saw posters with Jacob's picture and the words "Wanted" in bold pinned up on the bulletin boards. Underneath the posters, written in a large font, were the words, $500 reward for bringing the above person to me. Come to claim your reward by the entrance of the cafeteria. Going by the number of bulletin boards there were in the school, there had to be at least a few hundred of these posters. This was no less than the scale of being wanted nationally. What did you do to that girl to make her come all the way to our college to make you a wanted man? Sam asked Jacob curiously, as he anticipated
He
an
caught her. She
enthusiasm.
fell out of the sky.
How am I supposed to know? I don't even know who she is, Jacob responded impatiently. Escorted by the big crowd, Jacob unwillingly walked towards the cafeteria. He's coming! He's coming! Seeing that the wanted person had appeared, some students started calling out to Jacob. The crowd was now making way for Jacob to pass through. Under the curious gaze of at least 100 students, Jacob awkwardly walked towards the door of the cafeteria and stopped dead in his tracks. It was the girl from yesterday, the one who fell out of nowhere and seemed to be falling from the sky. She was wearing a white t-shirt and a pair of washed-out jeans. It was a very common outfit, yet it looked outstanding on her. Strands of her hair were drifting in the wind. However, underneath the fluttering hair, there was an angry face. Oh, someone started jeering. Such a pretty girl, Sam whispered into Jacob's ear. When did you meet such a beautiful girl? Give us an introduction. Sam turned around and winked at Jacob as he said that. He was itching to have another shot with a girl. Seeing that Jacob had finally showed up, the girl pursed her lips. Suppressing the awkwardness he felt, he walked up and asked under the many piercing glances, I heard you were looking for me. Did you take something from me yesterday? Staring right into Jacob's eyes, the girl questioned unflinchingly. What? What thing? Jacob was not expecting this from her. He felt surprised and confused. Now that they had started their conversation, the classmate who fetched Jacob from his dorm quickly came forward and interrupted them. Rubbing his hands, he said, Well... The girl glanced over at him and drew out her wallet. From the purse, she took out $500 and handed it to the boy. So she's a rich girl. Well, it seems her arrogance comes from money then, thought Jacob.
Come on.
You, did you take something from me yesterday? The pretty girl continued to question Jacob. What thing? Jacob stared at her with eyes filled with anger. It was a bead, a blue bead, she replied. I didn't see it. You must have dropped it somewhere in the orchard, Jacob answered without thinking. The audience was a little disappointed by their conversation. They felt that the girl had been bullied in some way and had come to seek revenge. The fact that she was only looking to recover a lost item was hardly entertaining to them. That bead is soft and bouncy, the girl explained. I'll give you 2 more minutes. Think harder. Can we talk somewhere else? Jacob felt the crowd's eyes on them and felt uncomfortable. Just give her back whatever you took from her. How shameless are you to steal from a girl? One of the students yelled at Jacob. Shut up! You have no right to comment on this. The girl was enraged at the crowd. The show's over, guys. Go away already. Go! Sam quickly addressed the crowd and they slowly scattered away. The girl quickly resumed the topic. That bead is of great importance, so I was hoping you could give it back to me. But I don't know what you're talking about. Before he could finish, the girl put out her hand and covered his mouth. Jacob caught a whiff of her scent and felt the softness of her palm on his lips. I can feel it here, right here. She slowly moved her palm from his lips down to his neck and placed it on his stomach. Jacob had goosebumps by now, and Sam was just staring in complete shock. Jacob slowly caught her hand to remove it from his stomach, but the girl quickly caught hold of his wrist instead and rolled up his sleeve. The green-colored dragon-like tattoo was revealed to the 3 of them. If you don't have my bead, how do you explain this? The girl asked, to which Jacob had no answer and was staring at her in complete shock. Episode 3, The Stubborn Girl. Not wanting to disclose the strange tattoo on him to others, Jacob immediately yanked his wrist away from the girl and covered his arm with his shirt sleeve. The girl stretched out her hand and placed it on Jacob's stomach as if she was trying to feel something. We are in public. Is it really necessary for you to be touching my stomach? Jacob felt helpless and smacked her hand off. Unfortunately for Jacob, the crowd had not completely vanished yet. Many were still waiting for more drama to unfold. A high school girl demanding something from a college man was something entirely unusual for the campus. Who would want to miss this scene? You two, whatever your problem is, resolve it somewhere else. Since he was unable to fully break up the crowd, Sam was trying to find another way to help Jacob out. Listen now, Sam addressed the girl. You've found Jacob now. He is a good man. I'm sure whatever is going on between the two of you can be solved privately. What's your name, girl? First off, do not call me girl. And, you call him a good person? I don't think he looks like a good person one bit. The girl was glaring at Jacob. You're not leaving until you give me back what is mine, she demanded from Jacob. Fine, let's talk somewhere else. Jacob grabbed the girl by her wrist and rushed towards the college building. Since the excitement and interest had died down, no one tried to go after them. After a short while of jogging, Jacob let go of the girl's delicate wrist and said, Why did you have to cause such a big commotion? I really didn't take anything from you. Who are you trying to fool? How do you explain the patterns on your wrist then? She glared at Jacob. It looked like she wasn't going to give up. First, I did not take anything of yours. Second, I saved your life yesterday. Not only were you not grateful, you hit me. Third, you alarmed the whole college and caused an uproar to find me. Just how am I supposed to go here after this? Jacob argued. Just give that bead back to me and all of this will go away. She continued to stare at Jacob, and there was a stubbornness in her voice. Her continually demanding something Jacob had no clue about was driving him insane. Hey, whatever. I'm going to go eat. Deserting the girl, Jacob turned around to go to the cafeteria inside the campus. However, the girl followed him closely and maintained her persistent expression. On entering the cafeteria, Jacob stood in line to buy food. And yet, the girl was stuck onto him like a nougat, following his every step. Even when Jacob took out his cafeteria card to order, her eyes were glued to him. I really don't know what to do with you. Swiping his card for the second time, Jacob sighed. One more order of meatloaf, please. As he carried his tray of food to the table, the girl also carried her tray and followed right behind him. As he sat down, she sat down right across from him. She was now copying his every move. She would take a bite of the food if he did, and when he stopped eating, so did she. Look, Jacob said in a pleading tone, I really did not take anything from you. He couldn't help but look at her helplessly. He certainly did not expect so much trouble when he went ahead to save a life. Your tattoo is saying otherwise. It is the clear proof for what you took. She insisted and refused to take her eyes off Jacob for even a second. And why is that? Jacob asked. Well, I can't reason with you. Anyway, I know for a fact that you have my bead. Which pocket did you put it in? It should be close to your stomach, right? You better not make me search you, she asserted. Search me? Jacob thought to himself. Why is this girl acting so stubborn and so brazen in front of a strange man? Jacob shot her a glance and carried on with his meal. It seemed that she had starved herself all morning waiting for Jacob because she devoured her meal at a super-fast speed. Seizing the chance, Jacob raised his head and observed her quietly. He found that the white shirt she was wearing was not a common white shirt. Even though the shirt indicated the vigorous spirit of a high school girl overall, it was more of a retro-style shirt. The lace knot on her chest was butterfly-like and adorned her petite body perfectly. Also, the bottom of her shirt was tucked into her jeans, displaying a nice contour of her slim waist. Along with her idyllic-style floral-patterned wooden sandals, Jacob was convinced that this girl must have come from a reputed family. Particularly, for someone who was at the age of a high school girl, her casual gesture of throwing out $500 so carelessly was definitely not common. At this moment, the girl abruptly lifted her head. She seemed to have noticed that Jacob was observing her. To conceal his interest and thoughts, Jacob quickly put his head down. Needless to say, the appearance of such an adorable girl in a university cafeteria had attracted attention from many of the university.
He's underneath me, but he's not biting.
They must just think this is my sister, Jacob reassured himself. You'd better leave as soon as you finish eating. Since you came all the way here by yourself, your parents must be worried, Jacob said to her. As long as you return to me what is mine, I will be able to go home with ease. I'm warning you, if my parents find out what I have lost and decide to come to you for it themselves, you will be in very serious trouble. With her eyes on Jacob, she suddenly spoke in a calm and mellow manner. Nonetheless, her words obviously hinted at the underlying threat. This time, her remarks caught Jacob's complete attention. He honestly had no clue what she was talking about. Kids at this age, whatever small matters they may run into, always like to involve their parents, so they could just conveniently hide behind them. With that being said, if her parents do get involved, this would become a very sticky business for me. Thoughts were running wild in his head. Yet, Jacob still didn't think that he had taken anything that was hers. He came out with nothing on him yesterday. After the encounter with her, all he brought back to the dorm were 2 decks of cards. As for the bead that she kept on babbling about, Jacob was wearing pocketless pajamas and a pair of slippers at the time. How could he have possibly brought anything away with him? She must have dropped it somewhere else. As for the green pattern on his skin, they were a reaction of the discoloration from his bedsheet, according to the doctor. However, judging from her stubborn character, he was afraid that her family would also believe that he had taken something from her. If it reaches that point, there would be no way for him to explain himself anymore. As he thought long and hard, Jacob felt that he was developing a mild headache over the trouble he got himself into from trying to save someone. Stop following me. I said I didn't take anything from you, and that means I didn't take anything from you. Even if you get your parents to come with you, I would still say the same thing, Jacob declared.
Alright, let's try one of the other ones.
After that,
We
he
know where
returned
he's
the tray
at.
to the cafeteria counter and walked out of the door. When he turned his head around, he found that the girl was still following him. Jacob decided to stop paying attention to her and walked right into the library building while drawing out his student ID. The card was approved by the card reader, and the door to the library opened. She wanted to follow him inside, but was denied access and the door began to close. Standing on the other side, Jacob gave her a small wave and walked into the lobby of the library without any hesitation. He was relieved that he finally got rid of her. "You will come to me yourself," she said as the door closed on her and Jacob walked away. Episode 4, A Visit Home. After ditching that annoying girl, Jacob went to the second floor of the library to look for some information. After spending 2 hours, he ended up borrowing a few relevant books and walked out of the library. As he expected, the girl was nowhere in sight when he got out. Looking up at the gloomy sky, Jacob was still thinking about the entire incident involving the mysterious girl. He wondered if he'd be doomed next week thanks to her. If her parents really came to see him about it, how annoying would that be? It was completely her fault for losing her belongings, yet she blamed him for it just so she could shirk off any responsibility of her own. When he returned to his dorm room, his roommates were all concerned with the cause and the aftermath of the incident. However, all Jacob told them was that it was smoothly resolved and did not go into any details. He didn't want to drag his roommates into something so troublesome and annoying. The girl is very pretty though. Just give her a couple years. She'll definitely become the most popular girl in any university. Sam sighed in admiration while patting Jacob's shoulder as he tried to comfort him. Sure, she was pretty, but she was also a huge troublemaker. Therefore, the smart thing to do would be to avoid any contact with her, thought Jacob. "Didn't you have to go home this weekend? Did you finish looking up all that information you needed?" Sam asked. "Yep, I am just getting ready to leave for home now." Jacob placed the books he borrowed from the library on his desk and took out another empty backpack. "Come back a bit early tomorrow so we can play cards in the evening." Sam patted Jacob's shoulder again while instilling a friendly reminder. "Sure, I will. Thanks for your help today." Jacob waved to his roommates as he left. On the bus home, Jacob couldn't help but roll up his sleeve to examine his wrist again. The green marks were strikingly similar to dragon scales. Thanks to his vigorous scrubbing, the green color had become quite pale. He imagined if his grandma saw this, she would surely think he'd been hanging out with the wrong crowd in school and got himself a tattoo. Jacob let out a heavy sigh. As he opened the window, a cool breeze came in and lightly caressed his face. Gradually, he fell asleep. Jacob woke up in an hour and realized that he was almost home. Sleepy and exhausted, he grabbed his backpack and got off the bus 15 minutes later. He started walking along a wide concrete path. From time to time, there were expensive and fancy cars passing by him. In contrast, carrying a backpack and walking on foot, Jacob felt a bit pathetic and miserable. It took him exactly 30 minutes to reach his ancestral home in Sturgeon Bay. It was a pretty house, but one of the most ordinary among the group of cottages that surrounded it. It was an ordinary-looking two-story cottage that was only 200 meters away from the beach. "Grandma!" Feeling a little exhausted, Jacob shouted as he pushed open a carved-through iron gate. "Jacob, you're back!" A kind and benign-looking woman came out of the house and welcomed Jacob with her big, wrinkly smile. "How come you were so late today?" "I have an assignment due next week, so I had to look up some more information before I could leave." Following his grandma
Sure he
inside
is
the
out there
house,
just
Jacob
seeing
asked,
Joe.
"How was your week, Grandma?" "Business as usual. Did some cleaning around the house, took some walks along the beach, tended to the flowers and the lawn, and did some stock trading as well. Uncle James is off on a fishing trip this weekend. Let Grandma show off her cooking this time," Grandma answered with a chuckle. "Stock trading? How much did you earn this week?" Jacob inquired lightheartedly. "It is not a business where you can just make money every week. In fact, I lost $6,000 this week. But this is not what Grandma cares about nowadays. Actually, there was news from Norway. Your parents are about to finish their expedition and might be able to come home next month," Grandma explained to Jacob as she walked into the kitchen. "Oh, next month? That is soon." Jacob followed her into the kitchen to help her out. Actually, they had hired a cook, Uncle James. It was so that someone could cook for Grandma and keep her company here in the cottage. As Jacob's parents were abroad and Jacob had to go to school during the week, it could get boring and lonely for her. However, Uncle James was away this weekend. Jacob made sure to come home to keep his grandma company. He liked being around her anyway and didn't need an excuse to visit. Besides his parents, who were elusive and rarely home, he was closest to his grandma. "Grandma, there is a question I wanted to ask you," said Jacob while he chopped vegetables. "Do you think dragons exist?" "Dragons?" Grandma seemed to be interested in this topic, and her eyes lit up as she began talking. "Apparently, some residents of Wisconsin had encounters with dragons here back in the days." "Really?" Jacob was now genuinely engaged as well. "Yes, actually, I had an encounter myself. I was young then, in my 20s. One day, I was working in the field, and a storm had come upon us out of nowhere. A good friend of mine and I were trying to find a place to shelter ourselves. It was then that I saw a chunk of awfully thick cloud suddenly descend to a low altitude." As his grandma mentioned the clouds and the change in weather, Jacob's heart sank. He urged her to go on. "Then what happened, Grandma? Keep going." "Well, at the time, I saw a flash of dragon-shaped lightning protrude out of the cloud, and it swam across the sky for a bit. I was terrified. I later thought it was an illusion, but the cloud was grayish to white, very different from the other clouds in the sky, which were pitch black." Grandma was lost in deep thought as she recalled the incident. "Lightning. I guess it was a natural phenomenon after all," Jacob stated firmly, bringing Grandma's attention back from her thoughts. "That was what your father said to me as well. But he never had any interest or tolerance for supernatural phenomena. However, the friend who was with me that day told me that she indeed saw a white dragon come out of the cloud. He flew downwards and started sucking the water from the lake. She claimed that she saw a broad spout of water ascend skyward from the lake. I asked if it was true, and she said she was absolutely sure about it and would never lie to me." Grandma's description was so vivid and detailed that it was giving Jacob goosebumps. If dragons really did exist, then why did you want to ask about dragons all of a sudden? Snapping out of her reminiscence, Grandma asked Jacob. "Oh, I was just curious." Retracting his surprised expression, Jacob lowered his head and continued to chop vegetables. "Here in Wisconsin, it is said that many people have seen dragons in the past. Also, according to legends from the past, there was supposedly a dragon palace nearby. Unfortunately, people of today do not believe in these occurrences and call them myths, Grandma added. Are these the dragons from the legends we heard as we grew up? Jacob asked. Maybe, said Grandma as she finished washing the vegetables. How come we don't see dragons anymore then? Jacob inquired. It could be due to the change of environment. With the deterioration of the environment, many creatures have gone extinct. Grandma's response had left Jacob speechless. Soon enough, the topic changed, and the two talked about various topics and finished dinner. After watching TV together for a while, they went off to sleep. Alone in his room, Jacob felt wide awake. He opened the window and gazed up at the splendid starry sky. Coupled with the sound of waves from far away, he thought about the story that his grandmother had told him earlier. He had developed an intense desire to find out whether dragons existed in this world or not. Lifting his wrist, the green-colored imprint was still evident on his arm. The more he looked at it, the more he felt that the pattern resembled dragon scales. Hey, I'm probably overthinking this. He closed the window, turned off the light, and proceeded to sleep.
Come here.
Episode 5, Arm Wrestling Match. Next day, Jacob woke up early in the morning. He exercised for about an hour and cooked breakfast for his grandma. Then he took a walk along the beach with her in the pleasant sunny morning. Jacob, you've become much more energetic these days, Grandma said to Jacob with a smile as the sea breeze billowed through her hair. My appetite has gone up as well, Jacob smiled back at her. Are you seeing someone at the university? Grandma smiled and asked. No, Jacob denied. You must have gone on a few dates, I'm sure of it. Don't try to hide it from me. Did you forget your grandma knows anthroposcopy? You seem to have good luck with women lately, Grandma chuckled. Education is my priority at the university. Why would I date a girl and distract myself? Jacob denied his feelings. That's your father's opinion. I, on the other hand, encourage my Jacob to date. I'm sure whoever you're dating will be a nice girl. Bring her along next time to meet me. Grandma's smile spread wide with enthusiasm. She had the warmth like that of a sunflower. All right, I will bring her to you as soon as I get a girlfriend, Jacob promised, and Grandma's smile became even brighter. The two of them looked at the ocean on the beach for a while before heading back home at a slow pace. Jacob picked up many little shells along the way. You've done a lot of shells growing up, haven't you? Grandma turned around and asked Jacob. As souvenirs, Jacob said as he straightened up. He threw a shell high up in the air and caught it. Jacob, you've been fond of the ocean ever since you were a little boy. Your warrior heart is as vast as the ocean. Grandma praised him as she walked on the soft sand with her mom. It is referred to herself. You're also affectionate and kind. What girl is your mother? This is my great grandson. Jacob did not see this coming and tried to hide his cheeks that had turned red. Here he was, nowhere even close to dating, and his grandma's thoughts were miles ahead. Up until now, he thought she was just missing her son. But it turns out she was seriously thinking about her grandson of a wife. He stayed with her for the rest of the afternoon after he had walked her back to the house. Then he started to pack for college. Grandma stuffed his backpack with all kinds of snacks and local products, making his bag heavier and bulkier than what he had carried from his dorm. Bring it to college and share it with your classmates. I like Sam and those other roommates of yours. She walked Jacob to the door and beamed at him. Yes, Grandma, I know. I'll share my food with them. You take care of yourself, Grandma. He wore his heavy backpack and started to walk. The people of his locality all had their own cars or bikes. As the houses were few and since everyone had their own commute, there weren't any bus stops nearby. The closest one was located near a tourist attraction. Jacob had to walk for half an hour before arriving at the bus stop. Jacob thought to himself on the bus, it was a pretty pleasant weekend. The bus headed towards the city. The salty sea wind was blowing through Jacob's hair, and he smiled to himself. Such a peaceful day after all the chaos. Once at his dorm, Jacob started to distribute the snacks his grandma gave him. It would take him over 2 weeks to finish them all by himself. The reason why Grandma packed so many snacks for him every time was to let him share them with his friends. In fact, his friends were also expecting these snacks. They knew that Jacob's grandma was fond of them all. Grandma's the best. She's so thoughtful and kind. Should I listen to her and actually start dating? Would seeing me with a girlfriend cheer her up? Jacob thought to himself as he handed out the snacks. Jacob realized that he wasn't feeling as tired as he usually does after the visit home. He walked with a heavy backpack, spent all day helping out his grandma, and took a long bus ride. Why wasn't he tired after doing so much? In fact, he was feeling energetic. It was great to feel this way, but strange too. Jacob was lost in his thoughts, and his one hand was clutching the large table in their dorm. He decided to test his strength and managed to lift up the table a few centimeters from the ground with only one hand. He was shocked. He immediately turned to Sam and asked, "Sam, didn't you say you want to arm wrestle with me again?" Sam was opening up a pack of chips in excitement. He turned around to face Jacob immediately. "Why? You want to arm wrestle with me?" "Let's give it a go." Jacob sat up properly in his chair and leaned forward on the table, taking an arm wrestling stance. "Damn, did I not defeat you hard enough last week? I will only use half of my strength for the sake of all the snacks you've brought." Sam put the packet down and sat in the chair opposite to Jacob. Jacob's physical strength was in fact not all that bad. His legs were strong due to his habit of going for a run and frequent walks every day. This is also the reason why he was able to catch the falling girl without much problem. However, he didn't have a lot of upper body strength, and that was why he always lost to Sam, who was 6 feet tall and had an athletic build in arm wrestling. The duo bent their right elbows on the table and firmly gripped each other's hands. A couple of students passing by saw this and waved at the others. Seeing this, students from the neighboring dorm rooms gathered around them. "Let me show you what an instant defeat in arm wrestling feels like." Sam rolled up his sleeves in confidence. Jacob was about to roll up his own sleeves, but then he remembered the green mark on his arm and thought against it. Sam and Jacob's roommate took up the role of the judge and announcer and shouted out loud, "3, 2, 1, go!" "Ah!" Sam shouted as he gathered all of his strength. Sam's arm fell with a thud on the table. Everyone was shocked to see this. "That doesn't count. That doesn't count. I wasn't ready yet." He waved his hands and said, "You started before I even sat still. That was cheating." Sam was exasperated at what had just happened. He was trying to save face. Jacob was shocked too, but trying to keep a steady expression on his face. Only he knew what was going on in his head, and he didn't want everyone else to see what he felt. "One more time." Sam gripped Jacob's hand as he wasn't willing to admit defeat. 3, 2, 1, and go!" announced the roommate. The second match seemed tougher for Sam, as he had to gradually put his full strength to compete with Jacob. In the past, not only was arm wrestling with his best friend effortless, he almost instantaneously won against him. Tables had turned this time, but Sam tried his hardest. His face turned red as blue veins popped out of his arm and forehead. He slowly took the lead in the match. This time, Jacob's arm banged on the table, ending the match in Sam's favor. The students in the room jumped up and cheered as Sam rubbed his sore arm. "Your arm strength has improved, buddy," he told Jacob, feeling a glimmer of pride for his friend and a slight envy. "Still couldn't beat you," Jacob smiled bitterly. All right, let's split the snacks up." Snacks! You took my chips while I was wrestling." The winner, Sam, jumped up and snatched away his bag of chips from his roommate. They both bickered, and none of them saw that Jacob had walked away quietly. Jacob reached the dorm balcony and leaned as he looked at the trees in the dusk. "I didn't use my full strength in the first match, and yet I was able to defeat Sam with ease. Then I decreased my strength on purpose so he could win the second match. That was a significant increase in my strength from last week's arm wrestling match. Jacob looked up at the moon with uneasiness as he rubbed his wrist.
Come on.
Episode 6, Sophie's Father. Under the moonlight, Jacob saw that the dragon scale tattoo on his arm had started to become lighter after several washes, but it seemed like it was glowing and had a mysterious power. The legend about the dragon that my grandma talked about wouldn't be true, would it? Jacob thought to himself. Jacob, come play cards with us, Sam yelled, shaking up Jacob from his deep thoughts. After the arm wrestling match, the 4 roommates were playing cards for almost the entire night. The weekend has passed, and it will be Monday when they open their eyes again. Jacob had trouble sleeping that night, but he had to wake up for classes first thing in the morning, so he forced himself to sleep. Next day, Jacob's classmates were having loud discussions with each other. Everyone was talking about the girl who came to school to find Jacob with great fanfare last Saturday, making it the hottest topic this week. They all started passing comments the moment Jacob entered the classroom. Hey Jacob, I hear you were flirting with a girl and now she's hunting you down? I heard this girl's pretty crazy, putting up wanted posters all over the school. Ah, too bad I went home on Saturday. I was in the cafeteria. The girl's pretty. She even touched Jacob's belly. Hey Jacob, what did you do to that girl? Stop accusing him. Jacob's a good guy. Of course Jacob's a good guy. He's been friend-zoned 6 times already within this semester. The discussion didn't exactly stop, even during class. Only the loud chatter had died down to whispers and passing of notes. Jacob did not bother to join the conversation at all. The comfort of the warm sunlight was making him a little drowsy. He occasionally looked up to glance at the class president, Kathy, who was sitting in the front row. She seemed like she cared a bit more than the others about what had happened. However, she immediately avoided eye contact with Jacob whenever he looked at her. The problem was that each time Jacob had a crush on a girl, his friends would confess his feelings to her. The result was that all of Jacob's crushes had very politely friend-zoned him. It was the same story with Kathy, and she too looked at him as a friend. But Jacob seemed determined this time. Maybe I should ask her to go to the beach with me. Kathy has been so nice to me in the past, and she's so beautiful. I'm sure Grandma would be happy to know that I'm dating a girl like her. But last time, when Sam told Kathy about my feelings, she didn't show any interest in me. She also made sure I knew that she looked at me as a friend. Jacob sighed at this thought and continued to sleep on his desk. The class was unusually long today and equally boring. Jacob woke up from a blurry dream and felt numbness in his right arm. When he was trying to get rid of the numbness by moving his arm around, he realized that it had become much thicker. Because of his long-sleeved shirt, Sam and others did not notice the changes in his arm. However, Jacob could clearly feel that his right arm had swelled up. After thinking about the weird tattoo, the arrogant girl, and the sudden increase in his strength, Jacob found himself connecting all these events. He stood up quickly, hesitated for a moment, and then rushed out of the classroom. Hey! Sam and the other 2 roommates, who were packing their bags and were about to go get lunch, saw Jacob leaving in a hurry and were puzzled. Jacob rushed out of the classroom and kept sprinting until he flagged down a taxi outside the school. Take me to Cherry Grove High School, quick! Jacob said anxiously as he hopped into the car. All right. The taxi driver started driving, sensing the tension in Jacob's voice. Within 10 minutes, Jacob reached the main entrance of Cherry Grove High School. The bell had just gone off a minute before Jacob arrived, and when he reached the door, a wave of boys and girls wearing the uniform and house badges started walking out of the gate. Jacob stood up on a high fence on his tiptoes and tried to find the girl who had fallen into his arms 2 days ago. However, all the students were wearing the same light blue uniforms, and they were also of the same age group. It was hard to pinpoint the girl in this swarm of students. After 20 minutes of looking, Jacob's eyes were tired and he felt dizzy. He was disappointed that he hadn't yet found the girl. Looking for me? A familiar voice came from behind and Jacob turned around. As annoyed as he was ever since this girl had entered his life, he was relieved to see her now. She was wearing the same light blue uniform, had the same ponytail and the same Cherry Grove High School badge as the other students. But there was this aura about her that differentiated her from the group of students coming out of the school. Her skin was radiating an exuberance that Jacob had never seen before. A girl, seemingly her classmate, didn't seem to leave her side. Her presence made Jacob a bit uncomfortable, and he suddenly realized that he was still standing on the fence. A bit embarrassed, he jumped off. I told you he would come find me, the girl said, confidently and proudly. Sophie, who is he? Her classmate asked her. Jacob heard her name for the first time in all these days and found himself controlling a blush. What is wrong with me today? He thought to himself. He's Jacob from the university. He owes me something, Sophie said with a familiar stubbornness. Jacob felt like his brain had split into two. One was a mind that was crushing hard on Sophie, and the other that hated Sophie. After hearing the response, the girl standing beside Sophie glared at Jacob. Come on, do I look like a bad guy? I think I look pretty kind and harmless. Jacob looked at the girls staring at him. So your name is Sophie? Jacob asked Sophie as he tried to break the awkward moment. Sophie's friend expressed her concern, but Sophie asked her to go home and not to worry. Once Sophie's friend left, she addressed Jacob. Isn't it too late to come find me now? I mean, it's good that you finally came to find me, but sorry, it's too late already. My parents know I lost the bean. Wait for the wrath of my father now. And don't worry, my parents are sure to find you by tomorrow. Sophie jeered at Jacob and walked away. Jacob held back his anger and muttered to himself instead. Sure, let your parents come see me. We'll see who's more afraid of who. He gritted his teeth and went back to the university. He went straight to his dorm to sleep. He wasn't even in the mood to eat. Jacob's roommates started chatting when they saw Jacob sleeping in his bed. Jacob seems so emotional, like a lovesick teenager. Is this because of that girl who caused a scene in the cafeteria? No way, Jacob likes that arrogant girl? Or maybe this is because of Kathy? Jacob really likes the class president? It is so obvious, all right? Should we help him? The next day, Jacob tried to act cheerful when he went to class, but he couldn't put up the act for too long. The green skin had disappeared entirely, but his entire arm was badly swollen. The veins in his arm were popping as if it was filled with supernatural power. But he had nowhere to release this power. It was extremely unnatural. Jacob's roommates knew that something was bothering him and ended up spending half a day with him trying to cheer him up. On the other hand, Jacob was in a bad mood every time he thought of Sophie and her parents. Perhaps they might even bring the matters to the university's administrative office. During class, Sam went over to the other two roommates and said, Jacob seems really broken-hearted. He's never acted like this before. Maybe we should take him to lunch and try to cheer him up, said one of the roommates, and as soon as the bell rang and the class ended, they went over to Jacob and said, Let's go, Jacob, we will buy you lunch. I really don't feel like eating, Jacob said while he was being dragged out of the classroom. He was wondering when the administrative office was going to call him and yell at him when a black car caught his eyesight. He saw a black Mercedes, one of the latest models, parked at the main entrance of the college, and two middle-aged men wearing black suits and white gloves standing next to the car. Many students were gathered at the gate, wanting to find out which rich kid these two were waiting for, because this was community college after all. Which rich kid would want to study here, except maybe he or she were being punished for bad behavior? Jacob and his friends went over to see what was happening. Unexpectedly, the two men rushed towards Jacob and said, So, finally, you're done with classes, Jacob. Our boss has been waiting for you. Jacob's friends were shocked. They let go of Jacob as they realized that their friend was the person these two men in black suits were looking for. The students began discussing this incident with each other. As if what happened at the cafeteria on Saturday wasn't big enough news already, the two suited men in a Mercedes-Benz coming here to find Jacob was certainly a sensational bulletin. So, Jacob's family is rich. Maybe they aren't Jacob's family. Look at his reaction. He was obviously shocked. Those who knew Jacob, but weren't extremely close to him, discussed the matter the most. You are... Jacob looked at the two men in confusion. Oh, right. Our boss is Sophie's father. He has asked us to pick you up after your classes. Don't worry, he won't take up much of your time. Please get in the car. The two men bowed gently to Jacob and said politely as they opened the door to the Mercedes. Episode 7, Sitting on the Clouds. Jacob never expected things would be handled like this. He had thought that Sophie and her parents would go directly to the college administrative office and make a complaint. But to his amazement, a sedan was sent to pick him up. Maybe it is an invitation to my own funeral, or a disguised kidnap? Whatever it is, I don't think they have any reason to harm me, Jacob thought as he stepped into the car. Jacob's roommates stared at the luxury sedan in astonishment. From what they knew about him, Jacob came from an ordinary background. They wondered what he had done to be taken away like this. The black sedan drove out of campus without incidents. On the way, Jacob restrained himself from asking the men sitting on either side of him any questions. He believed that he would get answers when he got to the destination. As the sedan was being driven smoothly, a sense of heroic tragedy rose in him, and Jacob started to wonder if he would ever come back. After about half an hour of traveling halfway across the city, the car came to the busy downtown. A skyscraper, about 70 stories high, came into view. Jacob had noticed the building when it came into sight, and he noticed the sign on top, MTX Group. Listed on the NASDAQ stock market in the United States, MTX was one of the biggest business groups in the States and undoubtedly a large business empire. "Sir, we have arrived." When the sedan stopped at the gate of the skyscraper, the two men got off and opened the door for Jacob. Glancing up at the skyscraper, Jacob felt a bit dizzy. After he got out of the car, he was ushered into the building by the two men who had driven him there. The receptionist, as beautiful as a movie star, glanced at the three of them and smiled. She didn't ask them to register and opened the security pathway for them. Jacob was suddenly struck with a wave of nervousness. The men led Jacob into an elevator before pressing the button for the 75th floor, the topmost floor of the building. The elevator started moving upwards, and Jacob felt dizzy and claustrophobic. He looked at his feet silently. Who on earth is their boss? Who can work in a place like this? He wondered. The trio had reached the top floor. The gates of the elevator slid open, and Jacob was greeted with bright red rugs, a gleaming lobby with golden decor, and magnificent chandeliers that hung on the roof above him. The lobby was as luxurious as a five-star hotel. The men remained silent while leading Jacob out of the elevator and ushered him forward. They stopped outside an office room with a sign that read, President's Office. Knocking on the door, one of them raised his voice and said, "Boss, we've brought the boy with us." "Bring him in." A dignified but fatigued voice came from the room. The man opened the door and ushered Jacob into the room. A big, magnificent office with an area of at least 200 square meters came into Jacob's view, and he couldn't help but let out a, "Wow!" Apart from Jacob's escorts, there were 4 men in the room. One of the men, who had a square face and a crew cut, locked his intense eyes on Jacob. "Is it on him?" he asked the man who had ushered in Jacob. "It is. I can feel it," the man answered carefully. "Sophie told me everything. I wouldn't cause you any trouble if you just hand it over now." The man, who seemed to be the president, looked sternly at Jacob. "I don't have it," Jacob said, grinding his teeth. Without further ado, the square-faced man spat out 2 words. "Search him!" 4 men jumped out and quickly grabbed Jacob's arms and shoulders while the men who brought Jacob here began to frisk him in a very professional manner. Jacob knew he had fallen into their trap, but he was sure they could do nothing to him when they found nothing on him. Just as he predicted, the man found nothing when he finished the first round of searching. When he began the second round, his professional frisking became rough and intrusive. Suddenly, the man raised his head in a panic. "Master, I've told you many times not to call me master. Call me boss." The square-faced man was enraged within seconds. "Yes, boss." The man pointed at Jacob. "The thing that belonged to Miss Sophie is in his stomach." The square-faced man froze, while the others' faces also changed expressions. After thinking for a few minutes, the square-faced man said, "Summon the elders." "Yes, boss." All the men in the room walked out, and only one was left standing beside the square-faced man. "Pick up Sophie from her school," the man told the escort standing beside him. "Yes, boss." The man followed the order and was out of the room promptly. Now, only Jacob and the square-faced man were left in the room. "My name is Dracon. What is your name?" The square-faced man gazed at Jacob and asked. "Jacob," Jacob answered. "Ah, yes, Jacob. You seem to be a good man, but this matter just got tricky, so you might have to stay here a little longer," he continued, still looking at Jacob. "Okay." Jacob's face didn't reveal how he felt. Though Dracon's words sounded like a request, they were actually a command. He couldn't run away from here, nor could he remain calm while there was a strange object in his stomach, especially when the object seemed to be related to the tattoo. "Take a seat." Dracon pointed at the seats beside him. Jacob walked over and sat on a leather sofa. Through the glass of the room, he had a complete view of the city and even a glimpse of the sea in the distance. They kept silent as the clock ticked away. About half an hour later, people began to rush in. They all looked confused and anxious. A little later, accompanied by a man, Sophie walked in. When she saw Jacob, she snorted with contempt. Of course, Jacob responded likewise. "Soph, don't be rude to the guest. After all, this chaos is your fault." Dracon didn't want to scold her in front of everyone, but he had to shut her up. Sophie pursed her lips, looking defiant. In a few moments, more than a dozen people came into the room. "Since everyone is here, let's begin the meeting. Sophie, you can come along too." After looking around, Dracon said with a tense expression on his face. A partition door opened automatically, and a small conference room that was connected to the office room came into sight.
Give me a minute, guys. I gotta
As everyone began to seat themselves
give me
in the
another cup of
conference
coffee.
room, Dracon turned to Jacob and said, "Please sit here for a while and wait for the results of the meeting." Jacob had no choice but to nod his head in agreement. There was not much else he could do. He just hoped these people could find a way to take the bead out of him without surgery. Alone in the spacious office, he looked down at the city and tried to stay calm. He felt like he was sitting on the clouds. For a while, maybe for a few minutes, Jacob felt calm, knowing that the group next door was planning a way out of this problem. However, what he didn't know was that his fate was being decided in the next room. Episode 8, The World of Dragons. In the conference room, Dracon sat at the head of the table with Sophie next to him, and the others took seats on both sides of the large table. Some of them looked puzzled about the situation, while others had grim expressions on their faces, since they had known about the reason for this meeting. "The reason I summoned you to this meeting is because Sophie lost her internal core to a mortal." Dracon was the first to speak. Those who didn't know the situation looked at each other in astonishment. Last Saturday was Sophie's first time creating the rainfall. Elder Liam was supposed to assist her, but Sophie, not liking the supervision, left Elder Liam to practice on her own. That is how this misfortune has happened. "I didn't do my job. Dracon, boss, please punish me." Panicked, the elderly with gray hair and eyebrows was about to leave his seat and kneel. "It wasn't your fault. Sophie is too stubborn. I've spoiled her." Dracon glared at Sophie and then faced the others in the room. "The problem is that Sophie's internal core is in someone else's hands." "If some mortal took it, we can just take it back," a man with bushy eyebrows and big eyes suggested. "If it was that simple, I wouldn't have summoned you here. Something unexpected has happened. The mortal has swallowed Sophie's internal core," Dracon continued after a pause. This piece of information stunned everyone at the meeting, including Sophie. "How is that possible? The internal core of our tribe?" Someone questioned the possibility immediately. Sophie's internal core has not matured and is very small. When it fell from the sky, it dropped into the mortal's mouth by accident, Dracon explained in a steady voice. Looking at each other, the elders began to talk in low voices. A mortal swallowing an internal core has not happened in 1,000 years. Is the person a cultivator in the mortal world, since he hasn't exploded after swallowing the internal core? There are likely no cultivators left after the last bunch flew away from here 300 years ago. Maybe only 2 or 3 are still living in the mortal world. The fact that the mortal has not exploded should be due to the weak power of Ms. Sophie's internal core. They talked in whispers for at least 2 minutes before they gradually fell silent. Elders, how do you think we should solve this problem? Dracon asked when they had all stopped talking. After some consideration, Elder Liam spoke up. This matter is quite serious. Although Ms. Sophie will not be in danger in the near future, without her internal core, she will not be able to cultivate and can't transform into a dragon. Besides, according to the ancient records, members of our tribe can't live for more than 5 years after the loss of their internal core before maturity, even if he or she is healthy. Does it mean that Sophie will not live beyond 5 years if she can't retrieve her internal core? Dracon asked. She may extend her life or even grow another internal core with the help of miracle herbs, but Ms. Sophie is too precious to take the risk, Elder Liam warned. Is it in the stomach of the mortal sitting outside? The man with bushy eyebrows and big eyes stood up abruptly. It is quite simple then. Bring him in here and cut open his stomach. We'll get the internal core back. Dracon remained silent, but he looked livid. Elder Bruce, it has been 200 years and you are still hot-tempered, the woman sitting next to the man said disapprovingly. Sophie's life is at risk here, and the mortal is just an ant, Elder Bruce shouted. At his outburst, some other elders seemed to be nodding. Kill him and dump his body into the sea. No one would know, he continued. Hearing this plan, the elders who were about to nod began to frown. Ignoring Elder Bruce, Dracon turned to the other elders. How about the rest of you? Do you have any other suggestions? Sulkily, Elder Bruce sat down and turned to ask the woman next to him, Was I wrong? The boss has told us to learn to be modern people. It has been hundreds of years now, and you still act and speak like a gangster. I wonder how you can survive the heavenly tribulation this year. The woman glared at him. I'm just all words and no action. You know I never kill. Elder Bruce smiled sheepishly. He looked embarrassed at his outburst. Shut up and listen to the elders. The woman still gave him a disapproving look. Meanwhile, another elder stood up and said, There is one solution that can solve both purposes. We don't have to kill the mortal and help Ms. Sophie to survive. Tell us, Dracon said with eagerness in his tone. However, the elder hesitated for several seconds before saying, I don't know if I should say it. There is nothing you can't say. Say whatever you want. I won't punish you, Dracon encouraged. Fine, the elder nodded. If the mortal has been able to absorb the dragon core, it means he might be able to gain some degree of cultivation. He can then transfer some dragon essence to Ms. Sophie to sustain her vital essence. Dracon looked doubtful and asked, Now, let's put aside the problem that a mortal might not be able to cultivate using our techniques. Even if your plan works, what should we do when Sophie is 5 years older? By then, the dragon core will be strong and big enough, and he can share half of the essence with Ms. Sophie. After all, the dragon core originated from her and will not pose any risks to her. They can achieve this result by... By what? Dracon asked impatiently. By... The elderly brought his thumbs together and spat out a single word with difficulty. Consummation. What? Sophie froze for half a second before jumping up and shrieking. Elder Frank, you are a disgraceful jerk at such an old age. Behave, Dracon glared at his daughter. Dracon had a powerful presence, which Sophie could not ignore, and she sat back in her seat, feeling defeated.
Oh, what we
This
got?
plan may be a plausible solution, said Elder Liam. In fact, even if we did as Elder Bruce suggested and took the core out by cutting open his stomach, it would not be safe to put the contaminated core back into Miss Sophie's body. I've read about the solution mentioned by Elder Frank in an ancient book. It is kind of a surrogate core cultivation. The problem with this kind of cultivation is that it takes a long time and needs the assistance of a cultivator without an internal core. In addition to all the restrictions, the cultivator will get very few benefits, and that is why the method has gradually lost its appeal over time and is not practiced anymore. However, in the case of Ms. Sophie, it's worth a try. No, Sophie shouted immediately. I'd rather die. Ignoring his daughter's outburst, Dracon waved his hand, and Sophie froze as if she was bound with an invisible rope, since she could neither move nor yell. Turning to Elder Liam, Dracon furrowed his brows. If this is the only solution, doesn't it mean Sophie and the mortal will have to... We don't have a choice, Elder Liam said humbly. After a moment's consideration, Dracon asked, how about that mortal's character? I did some investigating. His name is Jacob, and he is kind-hearted and very good to his grandmother. Though not very hard-working at his university, he is an average student. But he has great potential if he applied himself. More importantly, he is not married and doesn't even have a girlfriend. Marriages between dragons and humans are rare, but are not unheard of. Once he gets a new dragon identity, it's not against our law for him to cultivate our techniques. Dracon thought for a while. Let's hear him out and see how he responds to the plan. If he agrees, then the matter is settled. Episode 9.
Okay, let's
Becoming a
try
dragon.
one of the others, I guess.
Jacob was staring outside the window from Dracon's office. His thoughts varied, just like the clouds in the sky. He felt tense for a few minutes, and then calmed himself down.
All
He
right.
started pacing for a few minutes, thinking about his grandmother, but sat himself down on the chair, thinking that his parents were always there to take care of her should something happen to him. His head was aching by the time the meeting ended. It lasted for more than an hour. Jacob had mentally made up his mind to excuse himself from the situation. He was about to move towards the conference room when the automatic door opened with a loud swish. A dozen or so people, some old and some young, walked out of the room. Sophie was the first one who rushed out of the room. She snickered loudly at Jacob. Jacob just rolled his eyes back at her. He was tired of wondering how he had offended her. You lost your stuff, and I was brought here because of it. It's fortunate that your dad is a reasonable man, or I would have died because of you. Jacob couldn't help but let out his anger. While the others passed by Jacob on their way out of the office, they cast strange glances at him. Dracon excused himself to Jacob and took Sophie back to school himself. How he would persuade his daughter to let go of Jacob was beyond his imagination. Well, at least she was away for now. Only Elder Liam and Jacob were left in the office. Jacob looked at Elder Liam and waited for him to speak first. After going through all the countless weird events in the past few days, his mind was a bit numb, and he didn't even try to think straight now. Is your name Jacob? Elder Liam took a seat opposite to Jacob and asked kindly. Jacob stared at him. Yeah, and you are... You may call me Grandpa Liam. Elder Liam looked at Jacob kindly. You look a bit confused. Are you feeling lost? I'm not that confused, Jacob answered stubbornly. Elder Liam continued to look kindly at Jacob. You will be experiencing many new things in your future, Jacob. Well, Jacob waited for him to continue talking about this strange situation. What do you think of the girl, Sophie? Abruptly, Elder Liam changed the subject. Well, where to begin? Let's see. She's immature, unruly, willful, bad-mannered. Jacob started off without any intention to stop. With a smile, Elder Liam interrupted Jacob. But I'm sure you find Sophie very cute. I disagree, Jacob responded immediately. It wasn't true, but Jacob was finding it difficult to see her as cute right now. Well, perhaps you will find out more about her gradually as you spend more time with each other, Elder Liam said calmly. In the future? Jacob looked at him with alarm. Yes, the two of you will live together for a long time. Elder Liam smiled at Jacob. Jacob was alarmed. Why? Our boss appreciates you and thinks you are eligible to be his son-in-law, Elder Liam informed him. Jacob's jaw dropped in shock. Are you kidding me? Sophie is only a high school girl while I'm only 20. How could you even think of getting us married? Do you think that the bead you swallowed is an ordinary bead? Elder Liam continued. Jacob was holding his head in his hands by now. He remembered that something sweet like a candy had dropped into his mouth when he had caught Sophie. He gritted his teeth in regret as he recalled that day. What is it? What is this bead you speak so much about? Asked Jacob, lifting his head up and facing Elder Liam. Dragon core, Elder Liam said slowly. Jacob looked at him in a daze, thinking that the entire family had flipped their lids. Dragons, flying across the heavens. Do you envy them? Asked Elder Liam. Jacob shook his head. Dragons, transforming the sky and the earth. Do you envy them? Elder Liam continued to ask. Jacob shook his head again. Dragons, Elder Liam tried again. Jacob still shook his head. Elder Liam's old face dropped. If you don't listen to me, the bead will take your life at any moment. He saw that Jacob's face was full of questions. He opened his hand, and a glimmering greenish-blue water bead appeared on his palm. The bead in your stomach is like the water bead on my palm. Ignoring Jacob's astonishment, Elder Liam raised the water bead in his palm slowly. However, as time goes on, the water bead gradually expanded to the size as big as his whole palm. The huge greenish-blue bead had a clear reflection of Jacob's face on its surface. At last, it will... Elder Liam gazed at the water bead. The water bead burst and water splashed all over Jacob. Startled, Jacob took a step back. Elder Liam pointed at Jacob's stomach with a smile. Thinking of the moment when the water bead burst, Jacob suddenly had a stomachache. I have a set of cultivation techniques. You can take it and work hard on your cultivation, but remember, you must hide it from other people. This set of cultivation techniques can suppress the dragon core in your body and prevent you from dying of explosion in the near future. Performing something that looked like a magic trick, Elder Liam grabbed an ancient book that seemed to have appeared from thin air and placed it in Jacob's hand. Who the hell are you? Jacob asked. He felt like his brain was in a buzz of confusion and was unable to accept all the overwhelming information. We are dragons. Jacob backed off half a meter. Looking at the old man, Jacob thought he was bluffing. To him, he resembled the vendor who sold the Secret Ways to Change Your Life self-help books at the corner of his university. But Jacob couldn't figure out how he had summoned the water bead. Was it a new form of fraud? Faced with the complexities of society, Jacob didn't quite trust his recognition ability. I know it's hard to digest, but you will get used to it. Elder Liam patted Jacob on his shoulder amiably. Now that you are one of us, you must guard our common secret. By doing so, you are also protecting yourself. Jacob was baffled. What confused him more was that if they were indeed dragons, why did they dress up like ordinary people? They conducted themselves like businessmen, too, sitting in a posh office in a classy building like the one he was in right now. Flying across the heavens? Transforming the sky and the earth? Seriously? He thought everything the old man had told him was gibberish. He thought it was an elaborate scam. And who do these people think they were? They were certainly not a bunch of disguised superheroes hidden in the city like Superman or something. It seems you still don't believe me. Looking at Jacob, Elder Liam could read Jacob's thoughts by studying his face. He abruptly took the ancient book from Jacob's hand and put his other palm on Jacob's forehead. All of a sudden, a passage revealing shiny golden characters appeared in Jacob's mind. Before he could react, Elder Liam removed his hand. This is the first chapter of the Spirit Concentration Scroll. It is simple, and you will master it by meditating for half an hour every night. I will check your progress periodically, and you will be punished if you don't meet my requirements, Elder Liam told Jacob. His tone remained kind and gentle, even while giving orders. My God, the old man looks harmless, but is actually quite aggressive. When did I promise to cultivate this stuff? Jacob stared at him with panic and fury. Don't worry, these cultivation techniques will do you good instead of harm. On the other hand, if you don't cultivate them, you will be in danger. From now on, I'm your guardian in our circle. If you have any questions, just call me. Elder Liam took out a name card and presented it to Jacob. They even have visiting cards? The so-called dragons are quite professional. Or can I say, unprofessional, considering today's conduct. Speechless, Jacob took the visiting card and froze at the information on it. Liam Davis, Managing Vice President of the Sturgeon Bay University. Remember your identity. From now on, you are not only a student of the university, but also the Dragon King's son-in-law. Reaching his hand out, Elder Liam patted Jacob's forehead. Episode 10. A Pretty Teacher. Dragon King? Jacob was shocked and looked at Elder Liam suspiciously. You still have a class this afternoon, right? Why don't you head back? Elder Liam stood up and waved at Jacob. Jacob thought for a few seconds, stood up and walked out of Dracon's office. He took the elevator down alone. Standing in the elevator and watching the descending number of floors on the screen, Jacob felt like he was dreaming. He hailed a cab and sulked in the back seat. Only after seeing the familiar roads and streets, Jacob finally felt like he was back to reality. He took out his phone and called Sam. Where are you guys? He asked. We are in the art class in the left wing of the old building. Are you okay? We were pretty worried, Sam said. I'm fine. I'm on my way back. I'll see you in a bit. Jacob hung up the phone. The first thing he wanted to do right now was to find his friends. After a series of weird events, he felt like everything had changed. Jacob sprinted up the staircase to the classroom Sam told him about and sneaked in through the back door. What happened? Tell us everything, Sam and the others asked Jacob with concern and curiosity. Jacob sighed. I don't want to talk about it. Jacob waved his hand and sat down. Kathy, the class president who usually sat in the front, saw that Jacob had come back. She turned around to look at him. Seems like Kathy has started taking a lot of interest in you lately, one of Jacob's roommates nudged him. Jacob wasn't in the mood, despite seeing that Kathy was straining herself to look at him. He tried to remain calm and asked, Hey, what's the name of our principal? Thomas Jones. Did you not know that? Said Sam. What about the vice principal? Jacob asked again. The managing vice principal's name is Liam Davis. I don't know about the others, but he's of great importance. It seemed like Sam was in a mood to show off his knowledge about who's who of the campus, and Jacob let him. Sam went on, The managing vice principal is the most powerful person in the school, as he is just underneath the principal. Plus, everyone regards him and gives him all the importance. Jacob heard everything Sam said and didn't say anything more. Why are you asking about him? Is this related to the principal? Sam asked Jacob. Nothing. Jacob touched the pocket in which he had kept Elder Liam's visiting card and said, Nothing, I was just curious. Jacob, stand up and answer the question. The teacher saw Jacob talking to others. He also knew that Jacob wasn't in the class before and realized he must have sneaked in. He looked angry and demanded that Jacob answer the question. Poor Jacob. He wasn't there for half of the lecture. How could he answer any questions? He was scolded by the teacher quite badly. Kathy turned her head and looked at Jacob with pity in her eyes. After the lecture was over, Jacob, Sam, and the others returned to the dorm. Their other friends visited shortly after the class and asked about the Mercedes-Benz pickup incident. Jacob lied that his mother's elder brother from Singapore came down to see him, and it was a surprise. He simply picked him up for a meal, and that was that. He covered it up and didn't go into an elaborate story to avoid follow-up questions. You haven't been yourself lately. Did you get rejected by a girl? Sam blurted out later at night. Jacob was doing his homework, and he had a text message from Kathy a few seconds ago. Nah, I've been busy lately. Jacob wasn't paying much attention to Sam, nor did he expect Kathy to send him a text. He was about to reply when his phone began to ring. It was Kathy. What happened this morning? She asked as soon as Jacob picked up the phone. Oh, that. Well, one of my relatives, my uncle, actually returned from overseas and treated me to a meal. He gave me a surprise, and that's why I didn't know about it in advance. Where are you? Kathy asked. I'm in my dorm room, Jacob answered. Kathy was silent for a few seconds before she suddenly asked, Do you want to go for a walk? The moonlight is pretty right now. Jacob got butterflies in his stomach because he didn't expect an invitation like this. Class President Kathy was a popular girl. Not only every guy in his class liked her, but so did many others in their college. If Sam and his other friends didn't go behind Jacob's back and blab about his feelings to Kathy on his behalf, the relationship between them wouldn't be so awkward. Never mind. I'm all right, really. I have quite a bit of homework to do. Another time. Jacob struggled for a moment, but finally managed to turn her down. If you have questions, just ask me, said Kathy. After a moment of pause, she continued. No matter what, I am your class president. I need to take care of you. Isn't that right? Haha, well, thank you for your concern. Jacob couldn't think of anything else to say. No worries. Kathy hung up the phone. Jacob put down his cell phone and felt a smile spreading across his face. Who was it? Sam and his other two roommates asked as soon as he kept the phone. No one, Jacob continued to smile. You've been pretty mysterious lately. Not sure what you've been up to. Sam came up and punched Jacob lightly as he mocked him. Jacob took the punch from Sam and thought, if someone sees me and Kathy taking a walk, I'm not sure how the teachers will react. Shouldn't Kathy be concerned about this? In the middle of the night, Jacob sneakily crawled down from his bunk bed when Sam and others were in deep sleep. He opened the door to his dorm and walked out to the balcony. The moonlight was bright. Jacob took out Elder Liam's card and looked at it for a while before putting it back in his pocket. Might as well give it a try. After Jacob's stance was steady, he faced the silent sky and thought about the cultivation technique in his mind. The golden scripts emerged in Jacob's mind. Jacob tried to comprehend the meaning of the technique word by word and concentrated on his meditation as instructed. He finished a whole set at once, returned to his room sneakily, and found out that 2 hours were gone. Just like that. Jacob was surprised. He wasn't sure if it was a psychological effect or not, but soon after the practice, he felt that the swelling on his arm was gone and his arm felt good as new. He was relieved, but still in disbelief of his new world full of dragons. Whatever, I've done my part. Time to go to bed. Jacob suppressed all the other thoughts and fell asleep at once. In the next few days, life had become as dull as watching a stream of water. All the attention that Jacob had attracted in the last week was gone. However, Kathy still seemed to have an interest in Jacob. She kept glancing at him in class. Meanwhile, Jacob continued practicing his meditation every night after his roommates went to sleep, but there weren't any developments or visible changes. His strength was back to normal, and Sam could once again defeat him in arm wrestling. Soon enough, it was Thursday, one of the most exciting days for all students studying mechatronics. It was not exciting because of a compulsory course for the second-year students, weak optical signal processing, but it was exciting because of the teacher who was taking that class. Hurry up! Hurry up! We have to get the seats in the front row! Rushing out of the advanced maths class, Sam dragged Jacob and ran crazily towards another big classroom. Save 2 seats for us! Sam yelled out to one of his friends, but it was in vain. The first 15 rows were already occupied. We're too slow, said Sam in a disappointed tone. He picked the center seats, dragged Jacob with him, and saved 2 seats for his other friends. No, man, this is so far behind. The other 2 friends were equally dissatisfied when they saw the location of their seats. These people skipped classes to get those seats. What can I do? Sam said, innocently. Didn't you claim that you must marry her? You don't even have the guts to skip class, Sam's friend mocked him. Weren't you excited since yesterday for her lecture? Why didn't you bunk your class? Sam chuckled back at him. Soon the classroom was full, and even Kathy couldn't manage to get a front row seat. In fact, she had to sit far behind Jacob and his group. You've been having quite a few eye contacts with Kathy lately. Are you guys secretly dating? One of the classmates asked Jacob. I've been with you all day. When do you think I have these secret dates? Jacob rolled his eyes. The classroom was noisy. Other than Jacob's class, there were 4 other classes here as well. Everybody was talking, especially the guys. The bell rang and a pretty-looking teacher walked in. She was dressed gracefully in a short dress and looked dainty. All the guys gasped. She looks prettier than what we had heard about her, Sam said dreamily. As the guys gasped, Jacob couldn't help but stick out his head to look at their new teacher. Indeed, Susan dazzled in her clothes that accentuated her petite figure. It wasn't difficult to guess why the classroom was packed with male students. Susan walked to the front of the dais slowly in her high heels. Today, we are going to talk about the 3rd module. Everybody, open your textbook to page number 73. Susan's soft tone traveled from the microphone in front of her to every corner of the classroom. I'm in heaven. Sam was drunk on her voice. It would be so pleasant to have this kind of lecture every day. She's really pretty, Jacob looked at her and thought. The engineering students knew that they were going to have her only for a few sessions, and they wanted to make the most of it. In addition to her attractiveness, Susan's lectures were clear, organized, and easy to understand. Even the girls in the class had good reason to admire her. The 90-minute lecture sadly came to an end after all. Susan usually left the lecture hall promptly after the class, but she did something unusual today. You follow me to my office, Susan pointed out in Sam's direction. Me? Sam couldn't believe his ears. No, not you. The one to your right. It was Jacob she wanted. Episode 11. The Famous Boy. Me? Jacob looked confused as he pointed to himself. Susan nodded. Wow. The crowd gasped loudly and murmurs spread across the classroom. The pretty teacher who caught every student's attention, and also the one who didn't give anyone any attention barring teaching her class, was acting out of the ordinary. Jacob being called out by her was shocking, and not only Jacob came in the limelight once again, he was getting shocked and envious looks from all the boys in the room. Susan nodded at Jacob without saying a word. She grabbed her lecture notes and walked out of the classroom. Jacob followed her, having no idea what on earth Susan had in mind for him. Walking through the hallways and passing the overbridge between the academic buildings, Jacob walked into Susan's office as a crowd of students looked at him with curiosity. Susan was a bit of a celebrity in the mechatronic engineering department, and the university as a whole, owing not just to her beauty, but also the fact that she was single. Susan took out a key and opened the office door. Jacob smelled something refreshing as soon as the door opened. There were 6 or 7 pots of plants on the windowsill. The antique wooden furniture was far different from that provided by the university. It looked like Susan had bought them herself. The decoration of the entire office was elegant and graceful, making it seem like her own little world. Having her own office when most of the teachers had to share with each other showed that Susan's status here wasn't ordinary. All those carved chairs and shelves looked pricey. Susan's family seemed to be well off, Jacob thought as he observed the office. Susan closed the door and placed her lecture notes on the table. She pulled out a rosewood chair and sat down gracefully. She looked at Jacob and asked, "Where are you from?" "Mechatronic engineering," Jacob answered. Jacob looked around the office and thought that he was probably the first student who was lucky enough to be here. "Don't try to avoid the topic." Susan stared at Jacob and said, Jacob was confused. He was a student of the mechatronic engineering department. Where else could he be from? Susan looked annoyed now as her otherwise pretty-looking face twisted into a nasty scowl. She took her slender hand and grabbed Jacob's wrist tightly. It didn't seem like she had that kind of strength, but Jacob knew he couldn't move his arm even if he tried. "As I expected, your element is water. Tell me, where do you belong? River, stream, lake, or ocean?" Susan moved closer to him now, and all Jacob could think of was how many guys would die of jealousy right now if they saw this. Jacob was too confused and distracted to answer. "If you can't answer me, I have enough reasons to kill you," Susan said with a shrewd expression, and her eyes made Jacob's body shiver with fear. Susan continued to glare at Jacob and minced her words in anger. "How can this be happening? How can a normal being like you give out the aura of a dragon? How did you learn the cultivation technique?" She moved away from Jacob and sat back into her chair. Jacob hesitated for a moment and said, "I learned it from Liam Davis." Susan frowned in surprise. "Oh, is that so? It is a bit weird that a normal human can mingle with the likes of a prominent dragon clan. How do you know Liam?" Jacob was tired of all the new information he had been receiving the past few days. Feeling overwhelmed, he threw his hands in the air in despair and said, "I'm not sure if I should be talking about this anymore. Who are you?" "I'm an inspector, and it seems that you don't know much anyway." Susan rubbed her head as if suppressing a headache. She waved at Jacob to leave, saying, "You can go now. I'll have a word with Liam." She made it look like she was in a higher position than Liam, despite him being the vice principal and her being a teacher. Jacob was totally puzzled as he got up to leave. He was about to go out the door when Susan said, "Though you're new, I still need to warn you that I won't hesitate to kill you if you reveal our secrets to the world." Phew. Jacob drew a long breath of relief after he shut the door to Susan's office. As soon as he reached his dorm, he was flooded with questions from the university boys who had gathered in the room. "What did Susan ask you? Why was she looking for you? Did you go to her office? Don't try to keep anything from us, dude. Did you do anything that drew her attention?" Jacob was surrounded by them, but he didn't part with any information as he didn't forget Susan's warning. Realizing they couldn't get anything from Jacob, the boys decided to turn to his roommates as they were his closest friends. However, Sam and the other two didn't know what Jacob had done to catch Susan's attention. The 4 of them were always together when they were at the university, but they didn't notice anything else Jacob did that would interest someone like her. As a consequence, Jacob going to Susan's office had become a mystery among the students. Jacob brought them a lot of gossip and surprises these days. Gradually, people started to think that Jacob was someone special. However, as the person involved, Jacob didn't join in the conversation with the others. He was wondering what they would think about him if they found out that he still had the vice principal's visiting card. It was late in the evening by the time the curious boys dispersed from Jacob's dorm room, leaving the 4 roommates to themselves. However, they were all way too excited to fall asleep. Especially Sam, who kept asking Jacob what was with him and Susan. Jacob could make an excuse to fool the others, but it was hard to lie to Sam and his other roommates. But he thought it was safer if he remained silent and did not give Susan a chance to kill him. All the visitors are gone, and we're like your brothers. Jacob, can you just tell us what Susan asked you for? Sam asked sincerely. The other two strained their ears, hoping Jacob would spill the beans. Please stop talking about it and get some rest. Jacob sighed and felt very helpless. That is so unlike you. You tell me everything. Sam was deeply disappointed. Dude, you have been so secretive lately, said another roommate. Jacob couldn't help it. He used to be able to talk about anything with his friends, but in this case, there was nothing he could do. But you do seem to have some luck with the ladies for sure, said the fourth roommate all of a sudden. The lights of the dorm were switched off, and the four guys were talking in the dark and weren't tired at all. Yeah, I think our class president, Kathy, is interested in you too, the roommate continued. How come? Asked Jacob. Finally, a topic he could participate in. She keeps turning around to look at you nowadays. Don't tell me you didn't notice that, Sam chimed in. Make your move if you like her. What's the point of hesitating? The fourth roommate insisted. Don't be silly. I think she's just concerned about a fellow classmate, said Jacob. Jacob felt a bit panicky. He really didn't care too much about these things anymore. He felt that he got involved in something he wasn't supposed to. Now he was unable to get away from it, and there would be danger waiting for him at any time. Class crushes were hardly something on Jacob's mind. Don't you like Lisa, the most popular girl in the school? Teased Sam. That is all you, all right? I never liked her, said Jacob. But she is indeed beautiful. Someone else in the room likes her too, doesn't he? Don't you talk about me, said the third roommate. You were the only one all over her, Sam. Yeah, Sam is the ladies' man, teased the fourth roommate. The boys continued to talk and laugh until the morning, which left Jacob no chance to go out and date at midnight. But he enjoyed spending time with his friends. It seemed like it had been forever since he had a normal conversation, let alone a night of banter. The next day was Friday, and they were all pretty close to the weekend. However, the only topic on everyone's lips was Jacob and Susan. Even Kathy, who never talked in class, was quietly discussing with the girls around her from time to time. Jacob could tell that she was talking about Susan from the annoyed looks she gave him. The teacher couldn't concentrate on the subject at hand as the students continued to discuss the hot topic. Although he had warned them a few times, it didn't stop the murmurs. It will probably be over by this weekend. They're just too bored, I guess. Last time when an attractive guy from fourth year began flirting with Lisa, everyone was talking about that with great interest. However, they switched their interest to something else in 2 or 3 days.
Damn it.
Spinning his pen, Jacob in vain. There was a knock on the classroom door, and the teacher, who was already annoyed with the students making noise, opened the door angrily. He was ready to lash out on the student who had dared to come this late to the lecture, but he was shocked to find Vice Principal Liam Davis standing outside. Sir Liam, please come in, the teacher said quietly and took half a step back involuntarily. Liam kept a straight face and walked in. He looked at the teacher and then at the students in the class before asking, how can a class be so disruptive and loud? Seeing the vice principal enter the class, the students stopped talking completely. No one ever expected him to visit the class, and unfortunately, the class was being unusually loud when he was walking by. Liam's eyes were sweeping over the students in the class. When he made eye contact with Jacob, Jacob couldn't help but shiver. He felt his body freeze up for a moment. Get your class under control and teach it well. Liam left promptly with these words. The students looked at each other in despair, and no one dared to talk again. The teacher felt such a relief at that moment and nodded with satisfaction as he saw that all his students were finally quiet. He could now teach in peace. Jacob gave a sigh of relief as well. He had a feeling that Elder Liam had come here on purpose, but he was glad he left him alone. The lunch break came pretty quickly once the class was quiet. However, Jacob and his friends did not have another class that afternoon, which meant they were free to go home or stay at the university and chill. They all decided to head back to the dorm and play cards. As they walked from one academic building to another to get to their dorm, they passed by the gate and saw a limousine in the parking lot. They approached the car and started talking about it. "So there's an arrogant rich kid getting picked up by a car like that, huh?" said Sam in a condescending tone. They had heard about a handful of rich kids at the university who got picked up on weekends by BMWs, but it was the first time for them to see someone getting picked up by a luxury car like this one. It wasn't prom, it was just a weekend. Why a limousine? Not only the four of them, but all the other students who lived in the dormitories had never seen a car like this and were admiring it as well. Whoever walked by the gate slowed down either intentionally or unintentionally in order to see who was getting picked up by the car. "Is someone trying to show off by getting picked up in this kind of car?" Laying his arm on Jacob, Sam said disdainfully as they approached the car. "Yeah, obviously they're showing off," said Jacob. There was nothing wrong with maintaining a low profile, especially at a school or college. They turned around to go to their dorm when the car doors suddenly opened. Two tall men in black suits and a short, elderly man got out of the car. Seeing the old man, Jacob got bitterly disappointed because he had seen this elder at Sophie's father's office. He was Elder Frank, the old and disrespectful man Sophie hated so much that she wished she could tear him apart. "Jacob, Miss Sophie's family has invited you for a visit," the elder said with a twinkle of joy in his eyes.
Come on, man.
Episode 12. Welcome to the family. Jacob stared at the old man, stupefied. Sam and the others, however, suddenly let go of his arm and stepped away to stand at a distance from him. There were quite a number of students walking by the dorm entrance. Some had just got back from their classes, and the others were leaving for home with their backpacks. The others were simply
Well,
curious about
let's
the
try to
limousine.
go get.
They all started staring at Jacob curiously as the uniformed man and the elderly man approached him. Jacob was completely embarrassed, but he kept silent. "Please get in the car," Elder Frank said to Jacob reverently. "No!" Jacob's stubbornness exploded as he shouted. "What the hell is this? I didn't even get a notice beforehand." Jacob wasn't pleased about this at all. "My son, you are already engaged to Sophie. It's best not to act irrationally on these things," said Elder Frank. Although none of the other students were within earshot of their conversation, Sam and his other roommates could hear each and every word. Engaged? They couldn't help but say it out loud. "Who's Sophie?" Sam asked the others, confused by what was happening. But they simply shook their heads blankly in response. "Would you like us to keep waiting here?" Elder Frank asked kindly. "All right, you win." Seeing a crowd of students gathering, Jacob quickly got into the car without wasting another second. The black limousine drove away from the entrance along with Jacob. "It will be hard for it to be low-key after this," thought Jacob. "What's the deal with Jacob?" Sam spoke up as the car drove out of the university gates. The vehicle drove smoothly through the city for a little while before it arrived at a two-story house. No one would think of it as the house of a rich family by its unpretentious look. The vehicle stopped, and Elder Frank got out of the car along with Jacob. He rang the doorbell. "Come in." A cheerful lady wearing an apron opened the door and said softly, "I've brought him, madam. I'm heading back now. Please call me if you need anything," Elder Frank told the woman politely. "Yes, thank you, Elder Frank. I won't keep you from your work. It seems like you are about to break through the 9th level of Purple Light Scroll. I won't waste any more of your time," she said softly. "Thank you, madam." Elder Frank curtsied, sat back inside the limousine, and drove away. The woman smiled at Jacob, who was at the door, and said, "Come and sit down." She had a warmth in her smile and a friendly face. Her hair was tied up elegantly as if she had just walked out of a painting. Seeing her, Jacob forgot about all the unpleasantness that had happened just a few minutes ago. "Oh my," he exclaimed as he walked into the house. He stepped into the living room, which was cozy and luxurious. "You haven't eaten yet, have you?" She guided Jacob inside the house and asked. "No, not yet," he answered politely. He couldn't be annoyed anymore after this kind of treatment. Talking to this lady reminded him of his mother, who he hadn't seen in a long, long time. "I'm Helen, Sophie's mom. Her dad has gone to pick her up from school, and they should be back soon. Go ahead and take a seat. I'll go cook." She led Jacob to the couch and smiled. Then she walked into the kitchen. This must be the precise definition of what an understanding wife and loving mother is like, Jacob thought to himself as he watched her walking away. Jacob sat down and looked around the house. Even though it appeared to be plain and simple looking on the outside, the interiors and the decorations were elegant and resplendent. A white staircase to the left led to the bedrooms on the second floor. There was a study on the right. A large, dark brown bookshelf inside the study depicted how knowledgeable the family was. The rug in the living room was soft and plush. Jacob could judge how wealthy the family was by looking at the size of the medieval-styled chandelier that hung in the middle of the living room. The doorbell rang, and soon Jacob heard footsteps approaching the living room. Dracon entered with Sophie, and as soon as she saw Jacob, she gritted her teeth. Sophie was wearing her light blue school uniform. Though she gritted her teeth with hate when she saw Jacob, she wasn't surprised at seeing him. Her dad had informed her of Jacob's arrival. "Oh, you're here," Dracon greeted Jacob with a friendly smile. "Hello." Jacob quickly stood up and greeted him. He didn't really see Dracon as his father-in-law, but he had to be polite since he was a guest here. He glimpsed at Sophie, who was now sitting on the chair, pouting. Jacob shivered at the thought of getting engaged and falling in love with a young girl like her, not to mention their complicated background. "It's okay, Soph," Dracon said calmly and turned to Sophie. "You guys chat. I still have some work to do." He walked into the study and started going through some documents. Sophie stood on the carpet as she stared at Jacob. She looked like she wanted to eat him alive. "Let me warn you, I never agreed to marry you, so if you don't keep your hands to yourself, I am going to cut them off," she said aggressively. "The problem is, I never wanted to get married to you either, okay? What can I do when I've been kidnapped and brought here?" Jacob gave Sophie an angry look as well. He then thought to himself, should I be getting angry at a schoolgirl? Oh no, wait, she's my fiancée. Jacob gritted his teeth. "I'm going upstairs to play on my computer. Sit by yourself." Sophie gave Jacob a scornful look and began to walk towards the stairs. "Sophie, where do you think you're going? Go back and sit with Jacob now." Dracon's stern voice came from the study. Sophie gritted her teeth and stopped walking. She pouted after contemplating seriously for a while, rolled her eyes, and slowly walked back down to the living room as if there were thousands of stones tied around her feet, dragging her down. She sat on the couch beside Jacob reluctantly. "We can watch some TV if you don't want to talk." Jacob looked at her reluctantly and turned on the television with the remote control. Sophie kept on staring at him angrily. Ignoring her, Jacob went on browsing the channels to find something interesting to watch. A kids channel came on and the song Baby Shark began to play. "Is that good?" Jacob turned to her. "That's more like your taste." "How dare you!" Sophie reached out to grab something from the table to hit him with. "Sophie!" Dracon thundered out her name again from the study. He knew exactly what Sophie was doing. It seemed as if he had left a pair of eyes in the living room. Sophie kept down the vase that she had grabbed reluctantly, but her eyes were still fixated on Jacob. "I'm warning you, do not make me mad." Jacob smiled lightly. "You hate me that much?" Sophie pouted. "Well, I don't like you at all." "Me neither. You are always mad, and you are not all that pleasant to be around. It would be a pity if anyone had to marry you," said Jacob. "How could you?" Sophie's eyes were wide as she looked at Jacob. "Stop fooling me, too. You are going to be husband and wife in the future." Helen walked out of the kitchen with her dishes in her hands. "Mom, he's bullying
There we go. Yeah, Larry.
Why are you so reluctant in marrying me, by the way? Is it because I'm a stranger, or that you don't like me? Or is it because you have a boyfriend at school? He asked as he thought about all the high school couples he saw on the street when he had gone to meet Sophie at her school. She looked cute that day, thought Jacob. Maybe if she was seeing someone, there might just be some way out of this, Jacob thought happily. He then thought about the bead in his stomach and felt disappointed all over again. He asked again, "Answer my question. Are you seeing someone, Sophie?"
Ah, forgot about that rod.
There's something in the way you walk. You want to buy some baits. I can tell.
Oh, let's see.
Ferocious fiance.
Yeah, let's go for him.
Sophie turned to look at Jacob's face and studied his features. She noticed his brown eyes and soft hair. For a second, she couldn't take his eyes off him and seemed to be studying his inquisitive eyes. Jacob cleared his throat and asked again, gently this time, "Sophie, are you dating someone at school?" "I'm not interested in any of them, and even if I were, they are nothing like me. They would never..." She bit her lip and said, "They could never realize how liberating it feels to be different, to be stronger, to feel the wind, to soar amongst the clouds." She trailed off, lost in thought. She snapped out of it and said, "Anyway, they aren't so mature that they could understand any of this." Jacob looked at her. "You're not exactly mature yourself either." "Of course, I'm not as mature as you, Uncle." She emphasized on uncle on purpose to tease him about his age. He was a college student after all. Jacob smiled and stopped grilling her. He turned around and looked at Dracon, who was busy reviewing documents in his study room. It was amazing to watch a dragon king blend into the regular world so seamlessly, and to be one of the best businessmen in the country, too. He had a hint of admiration for Dracon, and for his wife Helen as well, who was busy cooking a homely meal for all of them. He felt right at home. He was surprised at the sudden turn of events, but he had a good feeling about being a part of this family. He hadn't had that feeling in so long. "Dinner time," Helen called out from the dining room as she brought the last two dishes out from the kitchen to the table. Sophie's father, Dracon, put down the documents he was studying and walked out from his study. "Come eat with us," Helen said to Jacob gently.
Here we go.
Sophie stared at Jacob and looked cross. She still wasn't comfortable with him being treated like family, much less his fiancé. Reading Sophie's mind, Helen said, "Don't make that face, dear. Even if Jacob isn't your fiancé, he's still our guest." She patted Sophie's head and nudged her towards the table. Jacob's brain froze again when he heard the word fiancé. "Sit down and eat," Dracon said to Jacob, as he himself sat down promptly as soon as he entered the dining hall. The table was just big enough for the four of them. Jacob felt a little awkward, but he couldn't resist their invitation. He sat on the chair opposite Dracon and sat down. "Are you busy at school?" Helen asked Jacob as she passed him the bowl of gravy. "It's going all right," Jacob answered, but felt weird. He had just met them. Why was he so comfortable eating at their house and interacting with them like a family? He racked his brain to start a safe topic of conversation so that it does not go back to Sophie and his wedding again. He finally remembered that he wanted to know more about the Dragon Clan, and now seemed like the right time to ask. "I know that you have a lot of questions about us, but I believe you will get used to it gradually," Helen said, as if she knew what Jacob was thinking. "Sophie is just in high school. Normally speaking, it's too early to talk about marriage at this age. However, marriage in your case has become time-sensitive. But it is not out of the ordinary to settle such matters in our circle at an early age. I must admit that Sophie's life is in your hands."
Oh, come on.
Jacob was stunned. He began listening to Helen intently. You swallowed Sophie's internal core. If we want, we could take it out by force from your body, but it will definitely cause you a severe injury. Sophie is a kind-hearted young lady, and she doesn't want you hurt at any cost, and nor do we. More importantly, she does not want you to bear the consequences because of her carelessness. Helen paused a bit here.
Come
Jacob
on.
couldn't resist looking at Sophie at this moment, and she met his gaze. She may not be in love with me, she may not even know me all that well, but she has the makings of a good wife, thought Jacob. So, we've decided to keep Sophie's internal core in your body and want you to start cultivating. Helen started speaking again. However, I must mention that this is not entirely safe either. If you can't reach a certain level in a certain amount of time, in other words, if your body can't suppress the overflowing energy of the internal core, the aftermath will be dangerous as well, she said. Jacob became nervous when the elegant and gentle Helen suddenly turned so serious. I don't mind telling you more, Dracon said abruptly. Actually, there won't be any negative effects for Sophie if we take it out of your body and return it to her. Yet, in order to have other elders believe in us, I asked Elder Liam to lie. He told them that Sophie wouldn't be able to adjust to the dragon core after it has stayed in your body. If it was left up to them, they would not have hesitated to take away your life for her. After
Alright, we got him.
countless dangers, he was half a step away from heaven just a few days ago. Dracon looked at Jacob. You have two options now. First, let us take out the core by force. This is a huge risk. Second, cultivate according to what we give you. There will still be a risk, but it will be much smaller. What I want to know is, Jacob looked at Sophie, how will Sophie be affected after losing it? The way Jacob took Sophie's name, she felt a hint of endearment and concern in it. She liked that he cared about her, but she was still uncomfortable whenever she thought about marrying him.
Alright.
There isn't any danger at the moment. However, 3 years from now, if you can't open up all the openings of the dragon core and transfer half of the Canate dragon essence back to her, she won't be able to live for more than 2 years, Draken said. Silence suddenly struck the dining table. In other words, if we follow the second option, everybody has to take risks. Sophie won't have to take any risks with the first option, but it will be very dangerous for me. Is that right? Jacob asked. Indeed. Dracon nodded. The dining table was silent once again. Is it necessary to get married? Jacob asked, addressing the elephant in the room. That was the condition of the second option. If everyone chooses the second option, you guys could only accomplish the required rituals by marrying each other, Dracon said, slowly and uncomfortably. Marrying each other? Jacob thought about it for a second and suddenly understood. He looked at Sophie's face, which was as red as a tomato at the moment. He also understood Dracon's discomfort as he talked about it. Are there any other options? Jacob asked. Temporarily, no, Dracon answered straight away. Silence struck the dining table once again. Sophie, though a bit younger than me, bet her life on me. She doesn't even know me and she did it anyway. Why should I hesitate now? Jacob thought to himself. Don't kill him, but I don't want to marry him either. Sophie spoke out suddenly. Clearly, it was bothering her. These two conditions can't coexist, Helen reminded her. Anyhow, I won't marry him. Sophie pouted her lips as her face turned red. Then Then should we kill him? Helen asked. We don't have to. Sophie bit her lips as she went back into a dilemma. After all, it was her mistake, and Jacob was innocent. Now, since you guys don't have any objections, let's follow the second option. Dracon hit the table and said, "Let's eat." Daddy! Sophie still wanted to protest, but she stopped after looking at the expression on Dracon's face. Sophie, you have to take responsibility for your mistake. Helen comforted Sophie. I've done some research on Jacob. He's a great kid who is considerate and respectful towards elders. Your dad and I are very happy. Why else would we agree to this? As long as you are not stubborn or defiant, you will grow to like him. On hearing Helen's words, Jacob felt a smile come across his face. He was still feeling pretty awkward about the situation and was as uncomfortable as Sophie about their new life together. He never thought about a high school girl as a girlfriend, let alone be his fiancée. How's your grammar, Jacob? Helen asked Jacob suddenly. After confirming that Jacob would be Sophie's fiancé, she addressed him even more amicably. I'm pretty good at it, actually. Jacob responded, and thought that they would have known how good his English was since they had already investigated and found out everything about him. Well, Sophie is pretty good at all subjects, but gets stuck at grammar. Come tutor Sophie for English grammar every day for the time being and get to know her better, Helen said. Don't we already know enough about him? Sophie pouted her lips and said quietly. Jacob wasn't sure about coming here every night. Besides, he never had experience as a tutor before. At the same time, Sophie can also teach you about cultivation. I think it'll be great for everyone that you guys help each other out, Helen said. Sophie and Jacob had no way out of this, and they both knew they had to do this regardless of how they were feeling. Thinking that his cultivation was related to Sophie's life, Jacob wouldn't dare to be careless, even though he couldn't accept her being his fiancée just yet. He thought about it and said, Fine, but you guys don't need to send a car to pick me up. I'll come on my own. Sure, it's not too far from your college. There is a bus stop near your campus to bring you here directly. Helen smiled when Jacob agreed to her plan. It was a very sweet smile. Jacob turned around and looked at Sophie. She looked a lot like her mother and probably had the same sweet smile. But she hadn't smiled at Jacob yet, so he couldn't be sure. He kept looking at her and kept repeating the word fiancé in his mind. She might be unhappy now, but I sure can see the beauty on the inside, thought Jacob. Episode 14. Dining with the Dragons. The dinner went smoothly after the situation became increasingly clear to all four of them. However, the tension didn't seem to melt. Dracon was still worried about his daughter. Helen was trying to pacify everyone. Sophie was still pouting with the decision of her marriage, and Jacob, well, he was dealing with it all. The family began to eat after clearing the air, and slowly, light chit-chat about work and the weather began. During the conversation, Jacob learned that the interiors of the house were done by Helen herself. Helen's non-dragon identity was that of an interior designer, and she was a renowned name in her field of work. As Helen revealed more about her work, Jacob was surprised to find that one of the top 10 landmarks in Wisconsin was a masterpiece designed by Sophie's mother. It was the stadium shown in the promotional pictures of the admission brochures of his university. It just finished construction last year. Her father is a successful businessman, and her mother is an outstanding designer. Her family is not just kind-hearted, but has also acquired wealth and have made commendable achievements. Even if they weren't dragons, Sophie had so many reasons to be proud of her parents. Jacob ate and thought at the same time. While dining, Helen was the one talking to Jacob the entire time. Dracon ate quietly beside her, would nod or add a word or two to the conversation. Sophie was eating with her head low, trying to focus on the food, but actually made a mess out of everything on her plate. Her peas were smashed, her chicken was in shreds, and her gravy and potatoes were well merged together. She clearly had a lot going on in her mind. Are your parents out of the country? Helen asked Jacob. Yes, they should be back next month, Jacob answered. Helen thought for a few moments and said, how about a meetup between the two families when your parents come back? Jacob's heart sank. He was only beginning to accept his new circumstances and the fact that Sophie was going to be his wife in the near future, but Helen's request put him at unease again. He thought, if Mom and Dad find out that I found a high school girl and chose her to be my wife, I have no idea how they would react. Helen could sense Jacob's hesitation, but continued talking. Since everything is settled, it's normal for the two families to meet, isn't it? Jacob looked at Helen and understood her perspective as a mother. She was right, and they had every right to meet his family. Sophie couldn't take it anymore and burst out saying, I didn't say I'll marry him. You have to be responsible for the mistake you made. If you hadn't run off after he swallowed your core, why would we be doing this at all? Are you being defiant because you want others to bear the consequences of your wrongdoings? Helen's expression was still gentle, but her tone was firm and a bit harsh. Sophie stopped talking because she knew that she was in the wrong. Yet she was very unwilling to marry a complete stranger, that too a college man, for this kind of mistake. Jacob is thoughtful, and I am happy with him being a part of this family. Helen looked at Sophie and said, you're not a child anymore, and you can't always lose your temper every now and then. You have to start realizing your responsibility and being mature. How long can your dad and I protect you? We also want you to learn from what has happened. You can't continue to act like a spoiled child. Sophie looked at Helen with a sad expression when she heard her mother talking to her in a heated tone. She wanted to cry, but didn't want to disgrace herself in front of Jacob. All that she could do was bite her lip and endure it. Seeing Helen lecture Sophie, her father, Dracon, remained silent. He obviously agreed with what Helen said. Jacob felt that there was another meaning behind how Sophie's parents were treating this matter. However, Sophie was too young to understand. Are they trying to utilize this chance to entrust Sophie to me? Can it be that even with their capability and background, there are still some dangers that they can't talk about? Jacob thought. Jacob. Jacob. Helen turned and looked at him directly and said, Sophie still has the temper of a child. Please bear with her in the future. Yes, I know. At this time, Jacob only accused. Sophie's eyes turned red and she was about to cry. Dracon sensed her feelings and said gently, go get some rest and come with your dinner, Sophie. Sophie nodded and went upstairs, climbing up slowly. Each thud of her footsteps resounded in the dining room. Jacob looked at her petite body moving upwards and then turned around to look at Helen and Dracon. Let her be alone for a while, Helen said. Jacob smiled awkwardly and began to focus on the remaining food on his plate. Honestly speaking, what do you think of Sophie? Helen asked after a few minutes had passed. She has taken a big decision at a young age, and I admire her courage. She is a wise girl, and I think she will do very well in her life. Jacob expressed, honestly. He thought to himself, Sophie wasn't exactly acting mature right now, but who wouldn't want to run away from a situation like this at her age? You're much more mature than her. Please take care of her for us. Her father and I are usually busy as we have a lot on our plate at all times. That's why we don't have much time to take care of her. It has made her personality more stubborn and arrogant. Helen looked at Jacob and said sincerely, I'll do what I can. Jacob nodded. Even though he didn't really know how to take care of Sophie, he wanted to learn how to for her parents' sake, and of course, he had to ensure the safety of his fiancée at the same time. He could understand how Sophie was feeling right now. When he was young, his parents were also busy working and didn't take care of him much. Therefore, he was more independent and had been a bit self-centered as well. It was fortunate that he had a caring grandma who always looked after him, and that allowed him to have better memories of his childhood. Sophie had nobody that would pull her out of her cocoon. Could you go upstairs and keep her company? Helen seemed concerned about Sophie. Jacob nodded and immediately put down his fork and got up. He was done with dinner anyway. He climbed up the stairs, glancing at a few abstract paintings that hung on the walls along the staircase. Jacob walked slowly. It felt like he was inside an art gallery. Through a small window in the corner of the second floor, Jacob saw the tranquil and beautiful garden from a window and couldn't help but admire Helen's sense of design. Sophie's bedroom was the first room on the corner of the second floor. Jacob could tell by the tiny pink toy rabbit hanging on the door. He stood at the door and knocked. No sound came from the inside. Hello, you won't let me in? Jacob stood there for a few seconds and asked. You can go complain to my parents if you want. Sophie's heavy voice came from the inside. Jacob smiled and took a few small steps on purpose to create the illusion of him walking downstairs. She quickly ran towards the door. She actually thought that Jacob had gone downstairs to tell on her and rushed to open the door. She ran out of the bedroom, wanting to drag Jacob from the stairs. However, she didn't anticipate that Jacob would still be standing at the door. She smashed right into his chest and lost her balance. Jacob grabbed her by the waist and caught her just in time. He bent low to meet her gaze and said, Could you not keep falling down all the time? Sophie felt the warmth of his strong arms and hands on her waist, and she let him move away the few strands of hair from her face. Jacob continued to talk while still holding her. Do you think I'm the kind of person who would tell on you? Sophie blushed hard and slowly began to raise her head and body. She straightened herself and Jacob slowly let go of her waist, but kept looking at her. You sure look like a person who would tell on me, but I'm glad you didn't. She looked up at him and smiled. Jacob walked into her bedroom and got a playful slap from Sophie on the back. Hey, where are your manners? Don't just randomly come into my bedroom. Sophie stood at the door and looked at Jacob. Jacob turned around to meet her gaze and came closer to her. You have a problem with me entering my fiancé's bedroom? You... Sophie stared at Jacob. She was hesitant, but somehow she didn't want him to go away.
Hold on, buddy.
Jacob looked at her eyes. They were red, and it seemed like she had cried. He saw this and quit the idea of teasing her anymore. He pretended to look around her bedroom casually. A poster of Sophie as a kid riding on her father's back in his dragon form was hammered in on top of the bed. She had a wide smile across her face. Sophie's mother had tried to make the room cozy and pretty for her darling daughter. But the high school girl sitting on the bed, confused about her future, made it all seem fruitless. Jacob sat down next to her on the bed and joined her in her silence. Episode 15. Almost Friends.
I gotta see what I
Jacob
caught
and
him
Sophie
on
had been quiet for some
last
time
time.
now. Jacob was sitting right next to her on the bed and could feel her body heat on his left side. The fragrance of her body mist filled his nostrils, and for a few moments he was lost in thought. He had told Sophie to stop falling every now and then, but now he wanted her to, just so that he could catch her again and feel the warmth of her skin on his hands.
So the yellow probe.
Jacob turned his head towards Sophie and saw that she was deep in thought. It seemed that she was
Yellow
still
frog,
upset, and
yellow
this feeling
frog.
wasn't going to go away that easily. He slowly got up from the bed to leave her with her thoughts. Just as he stood up, Sophie looked at him and said, "Where are you going?" Jacob turned around to look at her. "I'm just taking a tour of your room," he said gently. Sophie didn't answer him. She probably didn't know what to say. "I'll leave if you're feeling uncomfortable," Jacob continued. "No," Sophie exclaimed. "You can stay here," she said softly. Jacob knew she wasn't okay with the fiancé situation, but perhaps she needed a friend who could understand her situation because he was in the same boat too. "That's what I'll do, then. I'll be a friend," thought Jacob. He asked Sophie, "Is there anything to do around here?" Sophie got up from the bed and sat in front of the computer and reactivated the screen with her mouse. "We can play games on my computer," she said as the desktop wallpaper emerged. It was a picture of her in a bikini at the beach. Her delicate skin glowed radiantly under the sun amongst the blue waves. She had a bright smile, and she was sticking out her tongue in the picture. She seemed to love the beach, going by the happy picture. She quickly switched the screen, as she must have noticed that Jacob was looking at the picture. However, Jacob couldn't see her expression from where he was, but she was blushing. A little embarrassed, Sophie distracted herself by playing Plants vs. Zombies. She focused on continuing her last level, and as she did, she unintentionally forgot that Jacob was still in the room. Out of boredom, Jacob picked out a random book from the bookshelf across the room and sat down on a chair near the balcony. Soon, he too was lost in the book. Sophie suddenly remembered about Jacob and turned her head around only to see him read quietly. She couldn't help but glimpse at him in between the game. "He doesn't look like a bad guy. He is cute, too," she thought to herself as she looked at him. "But to marry him..." Sophie felt internally conflicted. She pouted as she carried on with her game. Time flew by as she fought through many levels. She was deeply focused on the game now, as more and more zombies kept showing up on her screen, and the pea shooters Sophie planted weren't enough to defeat them. She could do nothing but watch the zombies break through the door. She failed the level 5 times and finally got frustrated by it. She threw the mouse on the desk as if she was mad at her computer. "Don't take it out on the mouse," a voice came from behind her. She turned around to see Jacob standing behind her. When did he get here? She wondered. She couldn't control her blush. She blamed herself for being too focused and forgetting about Jacob. However, it wasn't completely her fault, as this was her bedroom, and she had always been alone in there. Her complete attention was at the game, and it made her forget about her fiancé. "I can't get through this level," she admitted sheepishly. "Plant 2 rows of sunflowers in the back. Leave an empty roll for ice pea shooters in the front. Plant another roll of pea shooters in front of that. Then, plant a roll of potatoes. Same in the water, except planting the lotus leaves first," Jacob said. "That would never work." Sophie wasn't convinced. "Your way isn't working either, is it?" said Jacob. Sophie pondered over Jacob's idea for a few minutes before she started the level again. She successfully passed the level using Jacob's strategy. "Did it work?" said Jacob, who had returned to his reading chair. "No," said Sophie. She didn't want him to think that he was right. Jacob stood up, pretending to go over and check. Sophie quickly exited the game in panic. However, her bikini photo was now in sight, and she bit her lip to control her blush. Don't look at it." Sophie stood up hastily to block his view. She was conscious about Jacob or anyone else seeing her in a swimsuit. Jacob chuckled and teased her. "I've already seen the live version. Why can't I see the picture?" Sophie gritted her teeth and clenched her fists. She hit Jacob on his chest. Thanks to the loss of her internal core, it wasn't a strong hit. Instead of causing pain to Jacob's chest, it felt like she had put her hand through a wall. Sophie smiled at Jacob's reaction because he was covering his chest and pretending to be hurt. "Humph, I shall teach you another lesson if you say something like that again," she said playfully. She then sat down and continued with her Plants vs. Zombies game. Jacob was bored of reading, so he dragged a chair beside her and watched her play. Sophie was, in fact, bored of playing alone, so she was glad he came to watch her. Not to mention, she certainly needed some help with some levels. "Plant a chomper here. Here, collect the sun. Here comes the last wave. Get the cherry bombs ready." Jacob kept on instructing on the side. "So annoying. I know." Sophie blamed the hard levels as she did what Jacob said. Her hand was moving quickly with the mouse. The two of them were too focused on the screen to realize Helen had quietly pushed open the door a bit to take a look at them, and stood by the door for a while. She had smiled and left in delight after learning that the two of them were getting along. Time flew until they reached the last level, and soon, it was time for Jacob to leave. Helen knocked on the door. Sophie paused the game, and Jacob snapped out of the game as well. "Okay, enough gaming. Come downstairs," Helen said in a gentle tone. Sophie turned her head to face the door to look at Helen, and then turned to look at Jacob. She suddenly realized they were sitting very close to each other, so when she turned, her face was almost touching Jacob's. She slowly moved away from him, her face turning red as she did. Jacob straightened himself as well. Sophie turned off the computer and hastily walked out of the room as she pretended to be calm. As she climbed down the stairs with him, she wondered, "A few days ago, I did not like that guy at all. How come I was having so much fun playing games with him?" Jacob was surprised at himself, too. They saw the table packed with delicious dishes when they got to the little dining room downstairs. "It's late, and I should get going," Jacob said. "Have dinner here," Dracon said in a calm tone. It sounded more like a command than an invitation. Would they keep me for the night, too, after dinner? Jacob thought to himself. But he quickly abandoned the silly thought and sat down. It was a usual family dinner where Helen and Dracon talked about the trivial things in life. Jacob was randomly listening in when they talked about things he didn't understand. Certainly, the couple didn't keep Jacob for the night after dinner. As he said his goodbyes, Helen turned to Sophie and said, "Go see him off, Soph." Sophie stood up reluctantly. She was tired. She looked at Jacob and followed him to the door. Jacob turned around when they were on the crosswalk outside of their house. He told Sophie, "It's okay. You can go back now." "Oh, thanks, Jacob." She turned around to go back inside. "Sophie!" Helen's voice was loud and scary. Reluctantly, Sophie turned back again as she looked at Jacob sadly. Jacob and Sophie walked towards the bus stop 500 meters away without a word. The ruffle sleeves of her white t-shirt and her floral red short skirt was fluttering in the wind. Jacob looked at her and felt attracted to her. He found her sweet, cute, and sexy. If it wasn't for their awkward situation, he would have kissed her, or asked her out at the very least. They reached the bus stop and Jacob gently asked Sophie to head home. "I know you're tired. The day was pretty overwhelming," he said. "Yeah," Sophie nodded with her head down. She suddenly looked up and stared at Jacob for a few moments. Then she turned and began walking back to her house. Jacob realized that he didn't even have her number as he watched her walk away. Even though she was just a high schooler, she should have a cell phone by now, shouldn't she? He kept thinking about her on the ride back. Does she even like me? Episode 16. The new popular boy in college. Jacob was alone at the bus stop thinking about Sophie. The wait for the bus seemed really short, even though he had actually been sitting there for half an hour. He got into the bus, pushed open the window, and let the chilly breeze pat his face. He mulled over his situation. He had a fiancée that he didn't know much about, except that she was attractive and her heart was in the right place. Second, he was now a part of a dragon clan that he didn't know much about either, but he was to become a dragon soon enough. Lots of work and not a whole lot of time to do it. It suddenly struck him that he had forgotten to ask Dracon about their clan or anything about the cultivation techniques. He just met Sophie's parents as their son-in-law and spent some time with his future wife. Sophie's father seemed quite cold, but he did shoulder a lot of responsibility as a mortal and as a dragon king. It seemed normal for someone of his stature to have a tough exterior. Sophie's mother was a very kind and intelligent woman, and that's it. That's all he knew about them. Don't tell me that from now on I would have to go to their house for dinner every day, Jacob thought to himself as a lot of things about his new reality dawned on him. After thinking about his situation for a while, he got off the bus after 3 stops. He walked into the Fairview bookstore and carefully browsed the high school section and finally bought some textbooks and guidebooks, such as English Test Bank and English Grammar. Walking out of the bookstore with a bundle of books in his hands after searching amongst the countless study guides on the shelves, Jacob was covered in sweat. He pitied the high school students who had to work so hard. As Jacob strutted back to the bus stop, he suddenly realized that the news about him being picked up by the limousine at noon in front of the dorm area would have reached every student by now. If he went back now, he wouldn't be able to get away from their endless questions. He was always trying to keep a low profile and didn't want to get too much attention from anyone in general. But recent events had made him one of the most popular boys in college. He immediately made the decision to go home instead and caught the first bus in sight. The bus ride was bumpy, but Jacob didn't care. He silently watched the twilight descending into night as he clutched hard at the study material in his hands. His thoughts were interrupted by a call on his cell phone. It was Sam. Jacob picked up the phone, and before he could say anything, Sam began yelling.
Jacob, why aren't you back yet? Where the hell are you? It's getting late.
I'm going home today, Sam. I'm tired. Jacob knew Sam would be waiting for him.
Oh, tired, huh? Looks like our dude had a great time today.
Sam's voice went from concern to playful in seconds.
What on earth was going on during the day? You left us all in shock, mystery man.
Nothing really. It was the relative from last time, asking me to have a meal at their home, Jacob answered casually.
Are you kidding me? You get picked up in a limousine and the old man tells you that you need to meet your fiancée and you say nothing's going on? Come on, man, tell me more.
Sam kept insisting. He was clearly excited to know everything. He went on trying to convince Jacob to confide in him, but Jacob knew he couldn't talk to anyone about his new world. He sighed silently as Sam went on. Nothing major is going on, Sam, I promise, Jacob said when Sam finally let him talk. I am just a bit tired, so I'll spend the night at my home and I'll tell you everything on Sunday.
Fine, we will wait for you to come back and continue our interrogation. We're not letting you off the hook so easily,
Sam said as he hung up the phone. Jacob was actually speechless about what Sophie's family did today. He wished that he could keep their circle a secret. But, on the other hand, the way they acted was so eye-catching that it drew so much attention. But who could ever imagine how different their identities really are? The biggest geniuses of the world often lie to conceal their mission. But by keeping such a low and mysterious profile, it may draw even more attention from others. Jacob continued to wonder long after Sam had hung up on him. Jacob wanted to stop thinking about his new dragon in-laws for a bit, so he checked his cell phone. He wasn't surprised to see Sam's dozen messages and proceeded to delete them. There were a few from his class president, Kathy, as well. He sighed as he deleted those, too. What was the point? He already has a fiancée. he laid his head against the window and took a nap. It was very late at night when he got home. His grandma was surprised to see him because he never came home at this hour, but she was happy with the surprise and gave Jacob a big hug. He felt so light and unburdened in her presence that he almost blurted out about Sophie, but he bit his tongue and decided to keep it a secret for now. After spending the weekend peacefully with his grandma, he planned to go back to the university on Sunday morning so he could avoid the crazy gossip that must be going around about him. The big pile of sacks his grandma sent for his friends couldn't keep Sam and his roommates off his back. On hearing that Jacob was back, even the guys from other dorms flooded over. Hey man, you made such a big scene. Getting picked up by a limousine? I heard that even the rich boy Malcolm from the advanced class wouldn't get such treatment, said Henry, who had welcomed himself into Jacob's dorm. We heard about the fiancé. We know everything. Don't try to hide anything from us, said another uninvited classmate. Even the girls were talking about you. They were saying that your family's filthy rich. Tia, a senior, who didn't know you even existed, was also talking about you too. Don't tell me that you hired some people to put on a show in order to cause a sensation. Oh, that girl was cute. What was her name again? Dude, you seem quiet at the university, but you actually meet a lot of girls outside of campus, don't you? They were beginning to take it too far. Jacob only.
There we go. We got him. Hey, we leveled up 99. Sweet.
Linda, my treat. The guys were all disappointed because there was no gossip, but they all got excited about the treat. They all rushed out of the dorm building, dragging Jacob along.
I think we got one more to catch. Yep, the one on Asia.
For cheeseburgers at the diner close by. Jacob had no choice but to shell out some money to end the drama. After what seemed like a night of endless gluttony, Jacob
Caught. Active. Okay. This one is going to be a pain.
The entire college was talking about him. They were
He
taking
likes
guesses
sun.
at who his fiancée could be. Bets were being placed in secrecy, and the rich kids caught wind of the news too. They were all set to rag Jacob, but he never showed up this weekend.
Does he like spinners? Let me see. I can't remember.
Thanked his stars. Having dined and
Popper, frog, jerk bait, tube, worm, spoon, crankbait, grub, swim bait, spinner, spinner bait, shad,
the four of them stopped dead in their tracks as
jerk.
they ran into
Okay.
Vice Principal Liam and some other teachers at the university.
Yeah, actually, spinner bait works.
Seeing the vice principal up close, the roommates who were laughing and singing songs became
Spinner. Okay.
They were
Give me a minute, boys and girls. I gotta
from him.
go to the bathroom.
To everyone's surprise, the vice principal smiled and waved at them, even though he saw that they were all drunk. Liam walked by them along with the other teachers, and the guys exchanged shocked looks with each other. Did I just see the vice principal wave at us? One of the roommates asked Sam, who seemed to have sobered up as soon as he saw the group of teachers. The other three simply stood there in shock, wondering about what had just happened. They thought that the vice principal would yell at them after knowing that they went out drinking, or would at least come up to them and ask which major and class they were from. But he just waved. Strange things happen every year in this college, but they sure are stranger this year, said Sam, letting out a sigh of relief. Episode 17, Dragon Mother. Jacob looked at his phone, thought about something for a few seconds, and then put it away in his backpack. His nose was in the high school English test bank. Jacob and his batchmates were taking university-level English courses, but Jacob was doing high school English questions. Due to the small size of this course, Jacob shared this class with only one of his roommates, and the other two weren't taking this class at all. The schedule for their sophomore year was always packed, and the library was always crammed with students who always had their noses in their books. After spending another hour on the test bank, Jacob shoved the book in his backpack, checked for his cell phone and wallet, and left the classroom. He had to reach Sophie's house by 5 o'clock in the evening. Jacob was even more anxious than the other day when he was picked up by the shiny black limousine, which ended up with him spending an entire day with the Dragon King and his family. He arrived at their house and rang the doorbell. It was Helen who opened the door. She was wearing an apron and her hair was tied up in a bun. Her hands were wet and the water dripped onto the foyer floor. She was obviously busy in the kitchen. "So early?" She let Jacob in and smiled. "Sophie isn't back from school yet?" Jacob entered and asked. He was a bit embarrassed about being early. He lacked the experience of being a tutor as it was his first time, but then again he was also inexperienced in being a son-in-law, so no matter what he did, he would always be conscious or embarrassed. "No, her Uncle Kenneth, my husband's third youngest brother, is picking her up because her dad is working late today," she answered, as if Jacob was already a member of the family. "Take a seat on the couch and watch some TV if you'd like. Make yourself at home." Jacob opened his backpack and put the study material for Sophie on the coffee table, and after thinking something for a few seconds, he turned to Helen and said, "Why don't I give you a hand in the kitchen?" "Okay, sure." Helen looked at Jacob with a surprised look on her face and then smiled. "Come along, then." Jacob rolled up his sleeves and went into the kitchen with her. He couldn't let her slave away in the kitchen while he chilled in front of the TV. Jacob entered the kitchen and found that all the ingredients and condiments were neatly stacked up. It meant that Helen was just getting started on dinner and hadn't actually begun cooking yet. Jacob did feel he had come too early, but at least now Helen wouldn't have to do it all by herself. Jacob could tell from the ingredients the kind of dishes she was going to make. He walked over quickly and started rinsing the vegetables and cutting up the meat without any instructions. He looked like an experienced chef in a restaurant the way he went about doing everything in the kitchen. "Jacob, you always help out at home, don't you?" Helen began prepping the chicken for the roast as she spoke. Not really. Sometimes I give my grandma a hand," said Jacob. "I could tell that you are a sensible kid." "If only my Soph had half your sensibility," Helen sighed. "She's still young. I only cared about games and gossip when I was her age as well," Jacob answered without even thinking. "Have your parents always been away?" Helen continued. Jacob answered honestly. "They are both always on the move and always busy, and I have spent most of my time with my grandma since I was a boy." Helen pondered. "Your grandma must be very lonely now that you spend most of the time at the university, right?" "I usually go to see her on the weekends." Jacob looked up at Helen at this point and felt that there was something going on in her mind. Before he could draw any conclusions, Helen spoke up and said, "Once you and Sophie are settled, I can invite your grandma here to live with us." "That may be a bit too soon." Jacob smiled as he felt his cheeks go red. "She doesn't know about Sophie yet." "She will find out soon enough. I know how much she would be looking forward to you getting married or bringing your girlfriend home to introduce her. Us grown-ups have only one intent once our kids grow up. That's how I know how she must be feeling." "Take your time, Jacob, but do tell her," said Helen. Jacob was about to say something, but he just nodded and began chopping the potato
Come
into
here.
thin strips.
Come here.
She knows exactly how Granny feels, Jacob thought. But this is all happening so fast. Jacob
Okay.
kept working quietly for a while when he remembered that he had a lot of questions for Helen. He thought this was the right time to learn a little about the Dragon Clan since no one was around. Plus, he was really comfortable with Helen. She reminded him of his own mother. "Could you tell me what role an inspector plays in the Dragon Clan?" Jacob asked in a straightforward voice.
Oh, you met an inspector? Helen was a bit surprised. A professor in my university. Her name is Susan, Jacob said. Oh, her, Helen said in a matter-of-factly tone. You know her? Jacob was curious. Inspectors are not a group of people who are easy to get along with, but Susan knows our family well, so she shouldn't cause you too much problem, Helen replied. Jacob thought to himself, inspectors? So there are more than one. Helen seems to respect them, too. Helen saw the curious look on Jacob's face and continued. The inspectors are a group of authorized figures of the Dragon Clan who are in charge of supervising the internal events of the clan. They have the right to interfere with anything that's against the rules, such as bribing and murder. They have the right to handle the matter themselves before reporting them to the higher authorities, as long as they have evidence of the crime. Wow, they seem pretty dangerous, like the king's knights when there were emperors ruling different countries, said Jacob. Don't underestimate them. Many of them are above the heavenly level in the clan. Elder Liam is already a master of the North Atlantic Dragon region, but even 2 Elder Liams wouldn't even be able to defeat Susan, Helen went on. Jacob didn't have a definite concept of the dragon's power, and neither did he know what their battles would be like. But Susan's power would probably be a lot stronger than he could ever imagine. Jacob had made up his mind about Susan being a dangerous person and that he should never be near her again. How did she know about my identity? Asked Jacob. The fact is that we all have our auras. You are at a very low level to sense your aura, let alone sense someone else's aura. But Susan Suhan is an extraordinary inspector of the Dragon Clan. She can certainly see through you because she can read auras, Helen explained patiently. Can't I hide my aura? Jacob asked immediately. You can, but if the person is much stronger than you, they can still see it, Helen said as if she knew exactly what was on Jacob's mind. She continued, but don't worry, we are not allowed to kill each other within the Dragon Clan. Susan won't hurt you as long as she recognizes your legal identity. She would even protect you. Plus, you are now a part of the North Atlantic Dragon Clan, and we won't let you get hurt that easily. Helen suddenly straightened her back and added confidently. Jacob was touched with the way Helen spoke to him. She had completely accepted him as her son-in-law. After all, why else would she welcome him to her home or promise to stand up for him if he was in danger? North Atlantic Dragon Clan. Sounds like it's really powerful. Susan surely must have some respect for them despite her authoritative role. Does Sophie's dad hold a high status in the Dragon Clan? Jacob asked the question that had always been bothering him. He thought it was a good opportunity to ask. He's all right. He's the king of the North Atlantic, Helen said lightly. Dracon, the Dragon King of the North Atlantic, to be precise, she added as she put the chicken to roast.
Come on. We gotta catch him, and we'll be done.
Episode 18. A Mere Mortal. Jacob was engrossed in learning about the mighty Dragon Clan while helping Helen out in the kitchen.
Come on, come on,
The
come
sound of
on.
the main door being opened interrupted their conversation.
Sophie is back with her uncle. Why don't you go talk to them and I'll take it from here?
Helen said softly to Jacob and gave him one of her endearing smiles. Jacob returned her smile and said, "Sure thing." He walked out of the kitchen and entered the living room where he saw Sophie in her light blue school uniform sitting and giggling away with a bulky man with bushy eyebrows and big round eyes.
"Hello, sir," Jacob greeted Sophie's uncle politely. The man did not bother replying to Jacob, but instead he scrunched up his nose in disgust. Sophie didn't try to smooth things out either. She threw her backpack onto the sofa, ran to the kitchen, and started talking to her mom. Jacob felt like he hit a snag with Sophie's uncle within seconds of meeting him. He felt bummed out and found himself a bit annoyed at the man he had greeted so kindly. He sat on the sofa and tried to withhold his feelings by reading the study material he had been looking at since morning for Sophie. Minutes passed by, and suddenly the man said with a grunt, "So, you're Jacob." Jacob did not take his nose out of the books yet and decided to ignore him. But, remembering Helen's kindness and the fact that he was to be married to Sophie, he looked up at Sophie's uncle and said, "Yes, I'm Jacob." The man did not say anything, but continued to observe Jacob, and did not take his eyes off him for even 1 second. Jacob didn't think about it at first, but it suddenly dawned on him that her uncle was observing his level of cultivation. He felt chills go down his spine as soon as he realized that. Useless. Swallowed Sophie's internal core and had so much time to cultivate, yet no changes to the body, the man mumbled loudly after a few minutes of observation. His words were harsh. Even though Jacob had a calm and collective nature, he couldn't hold back his anger when it came to his self-respect. He glared at Sophie's uncle. Sophie's uncle and Jacob were staring at each other aggressively when Sophie came out of the kitchen and said, "Uncle, Mom's asking if you have any preference for dinner tonight." "Anything will be fine, Munchkin. I'm not picky." The man with his bushy eyebrows and big eyes suddenly turned soft like a little sheep while talking to Sophie. "Okay," Sophie said as she turned around to go back into the kitchen. "Mom, Uncle said anything will be fine. Cook whatever you want." Jacob noticed that Sophie's uncle had a twinkle in his eyes whenever he saw or talked to Sophie. It was obvious that he loved his niece very much. Sophie came back and skipped happily across the room to sit down next to her uncle and promptly said, "Uncle, do you remember what you promised me in the car?" All right, I'll give it to you. How could your uncle forget his promise after all, huh?" The man took out a wallet from his pocket and handed her 10 $100 bills to Sophie. "Don't let your father know about this." He winked at her. Sophie was beaming with joy as she stuck out her tongue and put the money in her little pink wallet. She then hugged her uncle around his neck and said, "You are the best, Uncle Kenneth." "You crazy girl." Her uncle rubbed her head with joy, and his face was filled with love for his niece. They both continued to ignore Jacob as they got busy in their own conversation. Jacob knew her uncle was not happy with him, but he couldn't do anything about it. Plus, Sophie was much too excited and happy to even notice the tension in the room. Even if she did, she would side with her favorite uncle rather than the stranger she was unwilling to marry. Knowing that Sophie doesn't want this marriage, needless to say, her uncle would be even more defiant. "Great start in bonding with the family, Jacob," he thought to himself as he continued to ignore the two. He picked up the study material once again and pretended to read them as he brooded in anger. Helen broke the tension by calling them in the dining room for food. "Sophie, are you bothering your uncle again?" Helen said reproachfully to Sophie as she entered the room. Sophie was giggling and finally stopped playing the childish rock-paper-scissors with her Uncle Kenneth. "Come on now, you three. Dinner's ready," said Helen, and promptly left for the dining room. Jacob reluctantly walked to the dinner table. He felt angry and awkward dining with Sophie's uncle, but he couldn't say no to Helen. Plus, it would be rude to excuse himself now. He sat down and kept a straight face, disguising his anger.
Okay.
All four of them sat down to dine, and while Sophie sat across from Jacob, her Uncle Kenneth and Helen sat beside him.
5.
"This is Sophie's uncle, Kenneth. You can call him third uncle, just like Sophie does. Like Elder Liam, he is one of the elders of the North Atlantic. Sophie can explain the details to you later on. Helen introduced the man to Jacob after she sat down. Jacob nodded curtly at Uncle Kenneth after Helen's introduction. Kenneth grunted in acknowledgement and began to serve himself. Helen noticed that the vibe wasn't quite friendly, so she said with a gentle smile, "All right, let's eat." She handed Jacob the vegetables as she talked, and became a bit more attentive after sensing the tension. Despite Helen's gentle temperament, Kenneth wasn't able to keep himself calm. He blurted out loudly, "Helen, my dear sis-in-law, what were you and Dracon thinking bringing this mere mortal home? Do you think he's worthy of a nice girl like Sophie?" "Jacob is a really good kid. I like him. I hope this reason is satisfactory to you, Kenneth," said Helen, gently as ever. Kenneth was speechless, as if an egg was stuck down his throat. It was at this moment Jacob realized that Helen wasn't as soft-natured as she seemed. She glared at Kenneth. She had a persona where she never repeated herself, and she looked like she was even more ferocious and dangerous than Dracon, the Dragon King himself. Kenneth paused for a few moments and said, in a normal voice, "Others might not know, but I do. If he returns the internal core to Sophie, she will not suffer any harm." "But Jacob will suffer great harm," Helen replied sharply. "He's just an ordinary human, a mere mortal. Why should we care?" said Kenneth. "Enough!" Helen was angry. "Your brother isn't here, and you're arguing with me this way? This decision was agreed upon by the Elders' Council. Say no more." The fight over Jacob had put him in an awkward position. However, he felt his anger melting away now that Helen was defending him. "But..." Kenneth was not convinced. He wanted to keep on arguing. "About Sophie's problem, we have our own judgments on what happened. She has to be responsible for what she did. I know you love Sophie, but don't spoil her. You have to stop cleaning up after her each time she causes trouble." Helen's words were firm, and Kenneth finally stopped arguing. However,
Think
his
we might
face
have got
was
the
still
other one.
filled with disdain.
This is the last one for this week.
Sophie's face kept turning red and pale back and forth, yet she remained silent as
Yep,
she
we
didn't
got
dare
him.
to speak up.
That's amemasu.
"It's time for you to keep your temper under control.
There we
You're
go.
so violent. I would like to see how you are going to get through this year's tribulation with your habit of snapping at everyone around you,"
There we
said
go.
Helen. Her tone was softer now. After a few minutes of pondering, Kenneth said softly, "I still disagree with the decision of Sophie marrying a mortal."
Alrighty. That's
Helen
it,
let out a
guys.
long sigh.
Hope y'all enjoyed the
She
story
didn't want to
time as
argue
well.
anymore. "All right, we heard you, Kenneth." She looked at Jacob kindly and said, "Let's eat."
That's all 5 of them, guys. We'll return next week for continuation of the story. And go for the next ones. So we'll go to main menu here. And so we caught them all. Caught. So I hope y'all enjoyed. Come back and we'll try again next week. Daggone it. Hit the wrong button. And let's see, it took us 3 hours.